Hello everyone, I'm very glad that you listened to my story. Please give me a follow and like the video if you enjoyed it. Feel free to comment and provide feedback so I can improve the sound quality. Yes, we invite you to listen to part 4 of the series. Chapter 52, Chapter 52, Chapter 51, You're using this thing as a sedative, _1. Chapter 52, Chapter 51, You're using this thing as a sedative, _1. Close quarters combat was exactly what Fu Qian had been hoping for, but seeing Feng Yunhong's actions at this moment, Fu Qian had no intention of confronting him. Instead, he turned tail and ran. Thus, a bizarre scene emerged. Previously it was Fu Qian pursuing the close quarters Feng Yunhong, but now it had completely reversed, with Feng Yunhong, eyes bloodshot, chasing behind, and Fu Qian running a marathon in front, occasionally looking back to lash out with his whip. Bastard! Accompanied by a roar of despair, Feng Yunhong's figure staggered. The next moment, a muffled boom echoed as his body exploded from top to bottom, creating an indomitable storm. However, this terrifying strike was still a bit short and ultimately didn't reach Fu Qian up ahead. I knew you would use this move. Fu Qian snorted. It could only be said that you're thinking too much, big brother. I slipped away 8 yards when you were probably still playing in the mud. A hair's breadth away, Feng Yunhong's self-detonation was full of grief and despair. As he disintegrated, the bloodstorm that had devoured Li Weishuan and the others appeared once again. Face after face full of rage screamed within it. When the storm subsided, the area around the stone seat was drenched in fresh blood. Quickly, the blood that covered the ground once again slowly converged. Your methods are impressive. It's just too bad that as long as I am here, I absolutely will not die. Feng Yunhong's voice came through, now without the previous frenzy. His self-detonation hadn't harmed Fu Qian, but with that strike, he had successfully freed himself from an abnormal mental state. This line really has no creativity. Fu Qian shook his head, quite certain he had heard this phrase before. I will never let you destroy my decades of effort. This one, too. When I recover, I will let you experience what the ultimate pain is. Oh. Fu Qian was too exhausted to retort. Ignoring the recovering Feng Yunhong, he walked straight toward the stone seat. What do you think you're doing? Feng Yunhong's puzzled voice came through. He had thought this guy would desperately interfere with his rebirth, but he hadn't expected the other party to be completely indifferent. A bit tired, just resting a while. Fu Qian looked at the stone seat in front of him and casually babbled. Extremely simple in design, the workmanship was quite rough. Dark red bloodstains covered the back of the seat, and beyond that, there was nothing distinctive about it. Fu Qian sat down without hesitation. His mind thundered as if pounded by a heavy fist. His head truly splitting, his ears filled with indescribable noises. His head throbbed like his heart, expanding and contracting continuously. A massive influx of information washed over his consciousness, and Fu Qian felt his sanity shattering bit by bit, almost succumbing to unconsciousness. No wonder Feng Yunhong used this thing to suppress the consciousness of other transcendents. It seems he would sit here every so often, whenever he found that the consciousness of other practitioners showed signs of awakening, just to plunge them back into slumber. With his guess confirmed, Fu Qian struggled to stand up from the stone seat, rubbing his head. Ha ha ha. Feng Yunhong's manic laughter came from nearby. Surprised, aren't you? Do you really think sitting up here grants some sort of divine blessing? Ha ha ha. Do you know that since the day I discovered this place, I have endured this agony countless times over the decades? That's why you'll never beat me. I know. Fu Qian glanced at the frenzied old man, whose body was starting to take shape. Even if I devour you and become the dominant consciousness, unless I can endure to the end every time I sit on this throne, the control of the body will still be taken back by you, won't it? How could you know? Feng Yunhong's voice came to a complete halt. Each item mentioned by Fu Qian was one of his most central secrets. I know far more than just that. In fact, this pain is nothing to speak of. Fu Qian smiled at Feng Yunhong and sat back down on the stone seat. Although this is my first time sitting here, I still can't understand why you would use this thing as a sedative. No wonder you've been a fool for decades, never escaping. Fu Qian had a faint feeling that the stone seat seemed to have a mysterious connection with the essence of the furnace. The spiritual torment that caused Feng Yunhong great pain was not the main point at all. All at once, pain descended again. Fu Qian remained motionless, letting the torrent of terrifying information wash over his mind. He tried to follow the fleeting, ethereal voice, no longer resisting. At a certain moment, Fu Qian felt as if he saw his own body disintegrating, his flesh and bones all separating from himself. The next moment, they reassembled, combining back together in a strange form. His spirit seemed to merge with the entire ruins, his perception covering all places, able to look down on the whole domain from a high place, even seeing Ji Liuhuang and the others being attacked. In front of him still stood Feng Yunhong, with a solemn expression on his face. His body had taken shape, even the long halberd he had discarded was picked up again. Not only that, the discordant noise on his body also disappeared. It was just that his aura was somewhat weaker than before, clearly, self-destructing. That thing took a toll on his vital energy. Feng Yunhong stared intently at Fu Qian sitting on the throne, suddenly bursting into laughter, the long halberd aiming at Fu Qian, tracing a streak of flowing light. "Thank you for the reminder, letting me discover something new. Your will is admirable, and your intuition is quite sharp. Your only mistake was that you should have killed me before doing these things." Watching the oncoming Feng Yunhong, Fu Qian was expressionless. Just as the long halberd struck Fu Qian, an invisible vortex appeared, firmly grasping it. "What's going on?" Feng Yunhong's words were only half-spoken when he found he could no longer move his body. The next moment, to his horror, he realized his body was disintegrating, clumps of blood face mixed with flesh escaping from within and swirling around the stone seat, forming a vortex. "Thank you." Fu Qian blinked at Feng Yunhong. In fact, he had just reached his limit. Even if his willpower was as steadfast as a rock, his body inevitably had limits, having borne an unimaginable load. Under the potent effects of the stone seat, his mind was furiously battered, he even felt his brain boiling, ready to burst the confines of his skull at any moment. His realm was still too forced to interact with this thing. The only possibility to keep going was to involve Feng Yunhong, using the flesh of the many transcendents he had amassed to offset the wear and tear from the stone seat. Luckily, his words from before had an effect. Feng Yunhong, seeing him unhurt after sitting on the stone seat for so long, was clearly worried he would gain some advantage and couldn't help but make a move. As the vortex swirled around, Fu Qian could feel the lament of numerous transcendent consciousnesses. But having established a mysterious connection with the furnace, he seemed to have a fundamental difference from them and was no longer affected by anything. Soon, the bloody vortex surrounding him replenished the physical depletion and withstood the devastation brought by the mental assault. This was the correct order. Chapter 53, Chapter 53, Chapter 52, Turn a Blind Eye, End of Angel of Comfort, _1. Chapter 53, Chapter 52, Turn a Blind Eye, End of Angel of Comfort, _1. When it was Feng Yunhong's turn, his voice was filled with despair. The original vortex of flesh and blood had faded until it was almost invisible, and the accumulation of decades was exhausted by Fu Qian. And with it, the consciousness of each transcendent contained within disappeared into smoke. A complete and utterly opportunity-less annihilation. "What did you say just now?" In the face of Feng Yunhong's unwilling roar, Fu Qian suddenly spoke. "You've suffered unimaginable pain for many years, so I could never beat you, right? Here, let me show you what real pain is." Following the connection with the flesh vortex, Fu Qian channeled an endless stream of psychic shock into Feng Yunhong's body. Ah! The beast-like roar resounded as Feng Yunhong's consciousness experienced intense fluctuations instantly. Half a minute later, he let out a groan on the edge of collapse. "You, who exactly are you?" Fu Qian. In the face of the dying man, Fu Qian still maintained the posture of a victor, declaring his name with intonation and pauses. With a surge of even more intense emotional fluctuation, Feng Yunhong could no longer hold on and dissipated completely, his words of unwillingness echoing for a long time. "You charge for this, too. Indeed, the joys and sorrows of humanity do not communicate." Fu Qian felt a moment of poignancy. The men seemed to have misunderstood something. However, he had absolutely no sympathy for Feng Yunhong. Not to mention this fellow was a ruthless being who had surpassed humanity more than a dozen times, having hunted down more than 20 lost lambs. Just to think that over the years, this fellow used this stone chair as a sedative every day, yet failed to realize the chair's true nature. One can only say, when you were given the opportunity, you was just useless. And as the last bit of noise disappeared, the vortex of flesh completely merged into the body. Fuqian opened his eyes and slowly rose from the stone chair. From the outside, he seemed no different from before, not even a noticeable increase in strength. But only he knew that he had changed completely. Looking at his hand, he was sure that he was in a delicate state, like an invisible barrier of some sort. The specifics were hard to explain. To a certain extent, it was a bit like the philosophical concept of, I think, therefore I am. That is, he existed here only when he was aware of himself. If he let go, his existence would spread and merge with the entire ruins. Fuqian turned to look at the stone chair. If he guessed correctly, this thing was essentially the manifestation of the rules within the Crucible, a high-tier embodiment of the bizarre Great Fisher. The name Crucible implies the refining and restructuring of life energy that enters it to achieve an elevation of life forms. The palm monsters and skull centipedes were merely the lowest forms of restructuring. He had underestimated it before. Transcendents like Feng Yunhong and himself, who couldn't be digested, were instinctively expelled by the Crucible, treated like ambergris. On the other hand, the Crucible still held the potential to digest them. The premise was to be willing to withstand the shock, that is, to sit there, completely let go of one's consciousness, and accept the baptism of the terrifying stream of information. Just like he had done. At this moment, Fuqian confirmed that he was on some level homogeneous with the Crucible. Now, it was time to complete the mission. Before leaving, something shiny caught Fuqian's attention. It was Feng Yunhong's long halberd. Fuqian picked it up and weighed it in his hand, then casually planted it next to the stone chair. He had no interest in pole arms. Coming out of the underground chapel, no matter what kind of monsters were on the way, they completely ignored him, showing no reaction and allowing him a smooth, unobstructed path. Borrowing the mysterious connection with the Crucible, Fuqian quickly found Ji Liuzhuang and her party. At that moment, this group was groping along the edge of the Crucible, searching for an exit. 3 teams had already gathered together, their numbers fewer than last time, suggesting there had been more casualties. Broken arrows rained down from above as Archer Brother began testing for potential vulnerabilities higher up. However, most people clearly despaired, their eyes brimming with aimlessness. Fuqian moved forward without stopping and realized that everyone seemed oblivious to his arrival, their gazes empty as they swept over him, as if they were looking at air. This condition was truly peculiar. The creatures being oblivious to him could be explained by his assimilation into the furnace, them mistaking him as one of their own. But the same behavior from the group before him was rather intriguing. Fuqian remembered the furnace's effect of erasing external information and wondered if it was a similar property. The eyes clearly saw, but the mind didn't register the sight, so no reaction followed. To confirm his guess, Fuqian chose to walk directly through the team. As he passed through the line of people, only Li Weishuan frowned slightly and looked around alertly. Indeed, unless the difference in realm was too vast, noticing an anomaly seemed very difficult. Now, the barrier stood right before him. Fuqian reached out and touched it. If last time he was ejected, this time he was absorbed. Fuqian felt as though he had become a part of the barrier itself, like a droplet joining the ocean, able to move through it with ease. It seemed he could clock out now. Directorly, I still think we should explore the interior of the ruins. Just then, Fuqian heard Ji Liuzhuang quietly conversing with Li Weishuan. Although it was my idea to look along the edges for an opening, it seems like a wasted effort now. Moreover, Fuqian is still inside, we should check on his situation no matter what. He acted on his own, completely disregarding the safety of others. I don't think we are obligated to risk ourselves for him. The opposing voices emerged unsurprisingly. The girl had the right intentions, though she didn't know he had just passed right in front of her. Li Weishuan agreed with Ji Liuzhuang's opinion, but the dissenting voices in the team made him hesitant. After all, the current situation was too bizarre, and rash action was far too risky. Moreover, according to Ji Liuzhuang's description, the behavior of the student called Fuqian was also peculiar. Fuqian had been ready to leave, but paused at the scene before him and decided to shout directly at Ji Liuzhuang. Ji Liuzhuang was in a heated debate with Yuan Xin and a few others when she suddenly felt something and looked up toward a particular spot. Although it was clearly empty, she couldn't shake the feeling that something was beckoning to her. Brushing aside the others, she walked forward as if guided by a phantom, touched something, and then turned around in disbelief. There's a hole here. Even as she spoke, Ji Liuzhuang couldn't believe it herself. But on her hand, she really felt a smooth opening, large enough for a person to crouch and pass through. At her words, the crowd was initially stunned, then swarmed over in an instant. A way out had indeed been found. After confirming that the passage was real, under the coordination of Li Weishuan and Ji Liuzhuang, the excited group proceeded through the passage, one after another, escaping the despairing prison. Ji Liuzhuang insisted on being the last to leave. As she passed through the passage, she quickly picked up several stones and piled them up as a marker, thinking of leaving a sign for Fu Qian, who had not yet emerged. However, seconds later, she looked with some confusion at the markings on the ground, unable to recall why she had made them. At that moment, the escapees cheered thunderously, and Director Li called out, quickly leading them away in the opposite direction. After the group had gone far, Fu Qian floated down from the barrier. Using his connection with the barrier, he had just tried to create a path on it, and to his surprise, it worked. One could only say that Ji Liuzhuang had secured a chance for survival for the group. Containment successful. At that time, the awaited prompt finally sounded. Chapter 54, Chapter 54, Chapter 53 Forced Rest _1. Chapter 54, Chapter 53 Forced Rest _1. Task completed. Containment of specimen number 1-003 successful. The scenery before Fu Qian's eyes rapidly dissipated, and he found himself back in the warehouse, leisurely listening to the task summary. Assessment, Observer. Imagination is the wellspring of wisdom, otherwise, even with the path laid before them, the blind cannot find their way. On the path of the transcendent, there are threats that are beyond comprehension, even their fear cannot be conveyed. Once one steps into these dark wells, return is nearly impossible. They don't even need to harbor malice, their mere existence is a threat. As one of the unfortunate ones, you successfully recognized the incredible mystical information and saved some of the lost lambs, although the lambs won't remember the herder's presence. This catastrophic incident existed in the victims' minds for less than half an hour before it was completely forgotten, with the dead and missing fading away from the outside world, leaving no trace, not even in memories. No information related to this accident was recorded. Kills, none. Reward, SAN points +20, Inspiration +5, Thug 2/3. Current SAN points, 55. Would you like to replay the event summary? Why are there no kills? Shouldn't there be another 26 kills? Fu Qian looked at the task statistics, feeling indignant. Swindlers. Grumbling aside, Fu Qian could roughly guess the reason. Feng Yunhong and his group had already been counted once for kills, and he had received the corresponding benefits. It seems that kills wouldn't be counted repeatedly, otherwise, he could have simply delayed completing the tasks to farm 100 kills back and forth, maybe even unlocking some achievement rewards. Speaking of which, Fu Qian quickly reviewed his real rewards. Thug, digestion progress 2/3. Maintaining the calmest of thoughts amidst the wildest of slaughters is an essential quality for confronting all-powerful beings. As the information flashed by, a mental wave pulsed from head to toe, coursing through his body. Unlike the previous violent rush of blood and qi, this pulsation brought about a relaxed emotion, eased spirit, and a clarity of thought like never before. The mental trauma caused by the hard resistance to the information flow was swiftly healed. Not only that, but his resistance to mental attacks also significantly strengthened. Finally, he had advanced another step. The second phase of the thug seemed to focus on the mental aspect. The reason for the successful digestion was likely related to his resistance to the mental shock while sitting on the stone throne. He had worried that he might accidentally fall prey to a high-tier transcendent with mental abilities, but now, with his increased mental resistance, there should be nothing to fear. This reward was unexpectedly suitable, justifying the mental torment he had endured. As Fu Qian recalled the experience of sitting on the stone throne, his temples involuntarily tensed. Today's work is completed, thank you for your hard work. You have worked for 4 consecutive days. To ensure proper work-life balance, you will enter mandatory leave for the next 3 days, during which you will not be able to log into the warehouse. Work 4 days, rest 3. At first, Fu Qian was taken aback, but then he was very pleased with this humane regulation. The intensity of the missions over the last few days had been escalating, it was indeed time to rest and relax the nerves. As a freelancer, Fu Qian always had plenty of time on his hands, but this feeling of being on holiday had been missing for a while. After leaving the warehouse and returning home, there was still plenty of time left in the day. Fu Qian fixed himself something simple to eat, then descended the stairs and went for a walk with the unhurried gait of a retired old man. Fu Qian's home was in an old neighborhood, the kind without elevators. The majority of the residents in the neighborhood were retirees, couples whose children had grown and settled, many of them had been neighbors for years. At this hour, the morning sun was just rising. And the working crowd had yet to get out of bed, leaving only small groups of people exercising and walking their dogs. Speaking of which, Fu Qian did try to stick to an early morning exercise routine for his health, but he quickly had to give it up. The main reason was that the old folks really slept very little. Every day, when Fu Qian went out for his morning exercise, no matter how early it was, he would see them neatly lined up on the benches on the side of the road in the neighborhood, even segregating into 2 rows by gender, a sight to behold. Any young person passing by would be followed by their gaze until they were out of sight, followed by a flurry of discussion. Even a dog passing through would have its ancestry traced back several generations. Fu Qian wasn't one to have social anxiety, the scene was certainly not enough to scare him off. Sadly, many of the elders were quite familiar with his family situation, and every time they saw him, they would show a great deal of sympathy and concern. People always offer sympathy to those who pose no threat to themselves. Fu Qian, as a child, was the childhood terror of other kids, but now as an unemployed drifter, the elders no longer held any reservations, encouraging him to work hard and not to let himself go. After numerous encounters like this, Fu Qian eventually gave up on his morning exercise regime. However, today, he strolled leisurely towards the neighborhood entrance and even found a spot to sit on the bench, basking in the warm embrace of the early morning sun. He finally understood why the elders enjoyed sunbathing in the morning. Just like cats, that early morning sunshine has a comforting effect that fully releases one's laziness. The laziness of the elderly is different from the indifference of the so-called nobility. The latter is indifference after having one's desires fully satisfied, while the former is contentment after letting go of desires. As for Fu Qian, he was the type who would go with the flow, though he described it as being adaptable and unconstrained by external things. Fu Qian's appearance naturally caught the attention of the elders. However, considering his prolonged absence, no one approached him to talk just yet, but private whispers already began to swirl. Fu Qian didn't mind, he simply focused on enjoying his leisure time, not heading home until the sun became too harsh. The next day, as the sun shone down, Fu Qian was resting with closed eyes when he suddenly heard a commotion coming from the audience sitting by the bench. Fu Qian opened his eyes and looked over, noticing a dynamic red sports car cruising into the neighborhood. They might not have eaten pork before, but they've seen pigs run. The elders knew quality when they saw it, and their gaze quickly locked onto the car. Fu Qian took a few looks himself. He wasn't particularly enthusiastic about cars, but he wouldn't mind appreciating the crystallization of human industrial civilization. As he observed the car's sleek lines, Fu Qian realized that he actually recognized it. If he remembered correctly, young Master Qin had drooled over this car more than once, lamenting that it was so expensive he could only long for it from afar. The roads in the old neighborhood were narrow, but the sports car drove on considerately, wary of hitting any of the elders. The elders reciprocated with enthusiasm, eager as if they wanted to touch the car themselves. Under the watchful eyes of the crowd, the car stopped right in front of Fu Qian. Is it him? The driver's side window rolled down slowly, and a lady in sunglasses pointed at Fu Qian and turned to ask. Yes, Qin Mingzi replied with a complex expression as he stuck his head out from the rear seat. Chapter 55, Chapter 55, Chapter 54, True Art Touches the Soul _1. Chapter 55, Chapter 54, True Art Touches the Soul _1. Even with sunglasses covering most of her face, the lady still looked stunning with her fair nose, red lips, and long, enticing hair. After receiving Qin Mingzi's affirmative response, the lady even took off her sunglasses, revealing a bright and radiant face. She sized up Fu Qian twice from top to bottom and finally nodded in satisfaction, waving at Fu Qian. Get in the car. As soon as she said this, the old men and women around were all agog. Fu Qian didn't budge, looking to Qin Mingzi for an explanation. Let's talk in the car. The latter looked utterly disheartened. It was because of those 2 cases of local products. Fu Qian gave him a look and got into the passenger seat the lady had opened earlier. Not until the sports car drove off in the distance did the old men and women at the door come back to their senses, and they began to discuss animatedly. They couldn't understand how this young Fu could be unemployed and still have such a beautiful girl seeking him out with such eagerness. "Talk to me." Fu Qian led the two uninvited guests to his place and motioned for them to sit on the couch. Qin Mingze was no longer his usual overbearing self, his face full of obsequious smiles. "You're not busy these days, are you?" "Not busy." Fu Qian shook his head. "I have the next 3 days off." "Didn't you find a part-time job recently?" "It's precisely because the part-time job is tough that I work 4 days and rest 3. Okay, here's the thing." Young Master Qin pointed to the long-haired lady and let out a long sigh. "I have also found you a part-time job." Fu Qian looked at the long-haired woman. Although she was deliberately wearing heavy makeup, she didn't look much older, at most 1 or 2 years older than himself. Perhaps she was still in school. At that moment, she was eyeing him intently, making sounds of admiration, with a somewhat saucy look in her eyes. "May we step aside to talk?" Young Master Qin came over to embrace Fu Qian's arm and dragged him aside. "Do me a favor. Explain it to me first." "Well, it's nothing much, just need you to help as a life model." "Life model?" "Yes." Young Master Qin's face showed reluctance to speak. "Remember the photo of you I took last time? I photoshopped my head onto it." "Oh." Fu Qian instantly understood. "Was it exposed?" "Uh-huh." Qin Mingze nodded helplessly, pointing at the lady behind him. "Getting caught is nothing, we have the thick skin to withstand that." But to my surprise, she turned out to be this girl's roommate. When I was bragging, she recognized me. This girl is named Tan Ing. We grew up together in the same circles. She's now studying at the nearby art school. She blackmailed me into finding the real owner of those muscles to model for her. Otherwise, she threatened to make me the laughingstock of our circle. Qin Mingze finally clarified the situation. "All you need to do is model for her to draw you, and I've confirmed that you'll only need to bare your upper body at most. For the lower half, we can talk about additional payment." Unexpectedly, the lady named Tanning had sharp ears and chimed in at once. "The art school is worried about finding life models." Fu Qian looked at her somewhat incredulously. "Yes, but they're all older ladies." Tanning sighed. "I'm not saying there's anything wrong with older ladies, but as an artist, when you come across such a perfect body, there's no way you can let it slip by." "Is that so?" "All right." Fu Qian furrowed his brows and agreed outright. Not expecting his decisiveness, not only did young Master Qin's face light up with joy, but Tanning was also pleasantly surprised, covering her mouth and giggling. "Thank you for your cooperation." Sure. While exchanging pleasantries, Fu Qian spread his fingers to reveal the dream ring and chose to activate it. The next moment, the galaxy on the ring began to rotate, and an invisible veil spread outwards. "Is this the dream created by the ring?" Fu Qian looked around. If he hadn't known for certain he was in a dream, he would have seen no difference at all. He had no interest in being a model, so he had to use some special means. Considering that he couldn't just knock these two out and throw them out, he eventually decided to try this never-before-used dream ring to test its effects. Looking at it now, the dream seemed to be completely based in reality, with the three of them still sitting in the living room. And both Tan Ing and Qin Mingze clearly hadn't realized they were in a dream. In that case, there was a high probability they would consider everything that happened here as reality once they woke up. Fu Qian observed his own state, feeling as if he could do whatever he wanted, seemingly able to alter the dream's logic at will. Is it really this amazing? Let's try this first. Actually, I'm also somewhat of an artist. He approached Tanning first, beginning his mental onslaught. In my view, mere depiction cannot be considered within the realm of art. Fu Qian started with the lines he had prepared. True art should explore deeper things. Deeper things? Tanning asked subconsciously, her thoughts noticeably slowed by the dream's influence. Yes, like the clash and tear between the physical and the spiritual. Fu Qian looked into her eyes, speaking evenly and calmly. In this dream, he found his words to be particularly convincing. And the others were somewhat in a daze, having lost all their vigilance and defenses. What do you mean? Wait a second, I'll be right back. Okay. Tanning agreed almost subconsciously. Fu Qian then turned to Qin Mingzi. There's an old saying, one who causes a problem should solve it. You caused this issue, right? Yes. So shouldn't you be the one to resolve the mess you've made? I should, but how am I supposed to do that? It's simple, put this on. With a wave of his arm, Fu Qian suddenly had a black pleated skirt in his hand. This dream is really quite handy. Women's clothing. Why do you have women's clothing here? Qin Mingzi questioned subconsciously. A client's. Fu Qian blurted out a haphazard excuse, with no intention of dwelling on this issue. All right then. Qin Mingzi fell silent for a moment, then quickly agreed. After all, he had caused the problem himself, and while it was distasteful, a man had to take responsibility. Qin Mingzi never doubted that this thought stemmed from his own mind, reflecting his most genuine feelings. 5 minutes later, in the dream. What's this? Seeing Qin Mingzi appear before her in a black skirt, a long-waiting Tanning stood there stupefied. True art touches the soul. Fu Qian spoke softly. I believe that as an artist, you can sense the omnipresent conflict between spirit and body in this model. Tanning was quickly persuaded. Forcing herself to face Qin Mingzi, she scrutinized him with the gaze of an artist, but her hand holding the paintbrush trembled, unable to make a mark. After a long while, she sighed deeply and tossed the brush aside. I've discovered my artistic cultivation is still lacking, I need to go back and refine my skills. That's really too bad, are you sure you don't want to draw? Fu Qian sounded genuinely regretful at her side. I'm sure. Chapter 56, Chapter 56, Chapter 55 Evil Omen Must Die _1. Chapter 56, Chapter 55 Evil Omen Must Die _1. Amid the hustle and bustle of the road, a red sports car was crawling at a snail's pace, with two soulless and dispirited faces reflected in the rearview mirror. Tanning was driving the car woodenly, the air inside feeling as if it had solidified. Then suddenly, she slammed on the brakes, bringing the car to a complete stop. Qin Mingzi's head went straight into the back of the front seat, yet he seemed unfazed, merely giving the driver a sluggish look. Ah! As their eyes met, Tanning, as if awakened from a dream, let out a piercing scream. What on earth did you make me look at just now? What the heck just happened? Wasn't I supposed to be here to study the human form and incidentally check out handsome guys? How did I end up being sweet-talked into watching a cross-dressing show? And it wasn't even slightly aesthetic. Tanning attacked her own face in a frenzy. Meanwhile, the target of her scolding, young Master Qin, was closing his eyes and banging his head against the seat repeatedly. I don't know either, and I don't want to know why, it's like my brain is rejecting any information that has to do with it. And if you hadn't gotten all horny and blackmailed me, none of this would have happened. I feel like I've lost something important. Didn't you say your buddy was super close to you and would definitely agree for the chance to make some money? Tanning gripped the steering wheel so tightly it squeaked. Although this guy's bottom line is indeed unfathomably low, based on what I know about him, he wouldn't go as far as to sell his body for money. Posing as a nude model might be within the realm of possibility. His refusal only means he isn't that short on cash recently. Qin Mingzi analyzed expressionlessly. Xiaoying, if you want to meet a handsome guy, you should try a more normal human method. Your brother Qin can't take playing this game anymore. And don't talk to anyone about today's incident. If you dare to bring up today again, I'll flatten your head. Without turning her head, Tanning floored the gas pedal. After sending the two away, Fu Qian sat on the sofa, examining the clear dream ring carefully. It was the first time he had used it, and the effect was better than expected. So far, it seemed that once the ring was activated, everyone's consciousness would enter a shared dream reality, and upon awakening, they would deeply believe what had transpired in the dream. When Qin Mingzi and Tanning woke up, they were completely unaware of the earlier anomaly and quickly said their goodbyes. Considering their downtrodden mood, they clearly remembered what happened in the dream very well. In the dream, as the initiator, he clearly had considerable authority. He could freely enter and exit, and he could even set up some rules. In a sense, he was the director of the dream scenario. As long as the plot wasn't too outrageous, they wouldn't wake up. But people like young Master Qin were just ordinary after all. If the ring was used in containment tasks, the outcomes might not be as favorable. Take Li Weishuan for example, someone like him would probably not be affected by this hypnotic-like effect and would likely destroy it with a single strike. No need to think too much about it now, I'll just give it a try when I have the chance. Looking outside now, Fuqian noticed that there was still time to enjoy some more sunshine. Identity verification complete, work for the day begins. Vacations always pass by quickly. Following the 3-day-old man experience card, Fuqian put on his work badge on time, and a familiar voice came through. Warning, containment breach. Name, Evil Omen must die, code, 2-103. Today's work content has been updated, enter the containment scene for 2-103 and complete recontainment. That name is a bit odd. Fuqian frowned. Although it wasn't a one-beginning item and probably wouldn't be as disgusting as the Angel of Comfort, the name still felt abnormal. And then there were the illusions. Accompanying the leak warning, a surreal image also appeared in the warehouse, this time of a huge tombstone. It was plain and smooth, without a single word engraved upon it. If it is to be, so be it. One must always look on the bright side, it's at least a kill task. Where to go, how many to kill, in all the games, these are the types I'm most proficient with. Entering containment scene 2-103, Shiyuan City. 4%, 6%, 10%, 18%, 34%, 66%, 100%, containment scene loading complete. A dangerous evil omen is lurking, and calamity gathers with it. Find him, kill him, before the terrible disaster strikes. No matter which way. No matter if there's a way or not. Skills, air bullet, visceral. Critical strike, cat school, feast, locked. Weapon, tyrant's fist. Containment achievement condition, find and kill the evil omen. Current SAN points 54, current inspiration 21. A series of prompts flashed quickly by. Sir, please enjoy your meal. As the voice rang out beside him, Fuqian regained his senses and surveyed his surroundings. The light was dim, the atmosphere cozy, waiters shuttled back and forth in pairs and threes, and the sound of the piano was melodious and flowing. And then there were the men and women dressed to the nines, dining around him, clearly placing him inside a high-end restaurant. Fuqian looked down at the dish that the waiter had just brought over. Although he couldn't determine what it originally was, the plating was exquisite, the colors appetizing, and the scent made his mouth water. Aside from being laughably inadequate in quantity, it had no other faults. Fuqian unapologetically picked up a bite and tasted it, contentedly closing his eyes. This is what life's about. Compared to where he had been before, what were those places anyway? Just as he was about to take another bite, the piano music in the restaurant suddenly stopped. The next moment, a chill swept through, causing the dining men and women to scream. In the chaos, 2 individuals in black uniforms stood in the center of the restaurant, scanning the surroundings. An emergency has occurred, lunch is over, everyone stay put and don't move. Who are you? The diners present were obviously people of some status, and immediately someone wanted to slam the table and rise, but was held down by the person next to them. No wonder Tenming Xue and the others developed such bad tempers, these night watchmen really do carry an air of authority. Fuqian observed the 2 in front. If he wasn't mistaken, the 2 fellows disturbing everyone's meal were clearly wearing night watchman uniforms. The diners, except for a blind few, seemed to recognize them as well. However, these 2 were much weaker compared to Tenming Xue and Qi Xue. To the current him, they were at the level of foot soldiers. Humph. The foot soldier with a poker face seemed somewhat satisfied with the reaction of the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, please don't panic, we just need a little cooperation from you, this will be under control shortly, he said. Can you at least tell us what has happened? A middle-aged man mustered up the courage to ask. You'll know soon enough. The foot soldier made a gesture to his colleague, who quickly walked over to a corner of the restaurant. A woman in fine attire was dining alone there, her back graceful and enticing, showing no reaction to his approach. Foot Soldier B also remained silent and simply placed his hand on the latter's meticulously done hair and then gave a gentle tug. The next moment, the head of the well-dressed woman separated from her neck. Chapter 57, Chapter 56, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 2_1. Chapter 57, Chapter 56, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 2_1. The young woman was clad in a black dress, seated with noble and elegant poise, her neck as pristine and elongated as a swan's. The severed head still bore a sweet smile, while the body lay prostrate on the table, blood trickling out and staining the high-quality printed tablecloth red. This scene, so full of shock, was etched deeply into everyone's mind. After a deathly silence, a wave of terrified screams erupted in the dining room, as some people stood and ran for their lives. "Hush!" A grunt stepped forward and gestured for silence. Such a simple movement, yet it carried an overwhelming persuasive power. The screams ceased almost instantly, and everyone stopped in their tracks. "This was merely to inform you all of the reason for your cooperation. Please do not panic, and more importantly, do not move. I assure you that none of you are under any threat." The grunt said nonchalantly, signaling his colleague to put the head back in place. At his words, the diners in the restaurant fell silent as if chilled to the bone, daring not to have any objections, save for a few stifled sobs here and there. This was the authority of the night watchman. Fu Qian sighed, redirecting his attention to the delicacies before him. Although the incident was sudden, he had anticipated such events. After all, his mission this time was to prevent a catastrophe. Though he wasn't certain what the disaster would be, he never expected the places he appeared to be peaceful. Moreover, compared to his recent experiences, the scene before him almost qualified as refreshing. Breathing in the faint scent of blood in the air, Fu Qian picked up another piece of food, savoring the taste as he chewed swiftly, his face content. One must not lose the joy of life for the sake of work. His movements might be considered stealthy, but under these circumstances, they were glaringly discordant. Not only were the neighboring diners staring at him in disbelief, but even the grunt who commanded the room's attention with his presence furrowed his brows. After exchanging a look with his colleague, the grunt walked over to Fu Qian and stared down at him from his superior position. However, the latter did not even lift his head, continuing to empty his plate as if nothing else mattered. The grunt swallowed hard and then became inflamed with anger, causing the temperature around them to plummet another 10 degrees instantly. Name: Fu Qian. Age: 20. Occupation: specialist. Feeling great after his meal, Fu Qian cooperated, answering each question in turn. Unfortunately, after stating his occupation, he could clearly see the questioner's eyelid twitch. "Specialist? Is that your job?" "Yep, a professional specialist." Fu Qian blinked. "You stay put right here, don't move." The grunt's face turned a shade of green as he turned to look at his colleague. "I think this guy is highly suspect. In all my life, the thing I hate the most is specialists." The latter, upon hearing this, hurried over, sizing up Fu Qian with an expression of suspicion and disbelief. Such was the disparity in power. Fu Qian reflected internally, realizing that the other party was assessing his strength, sadly a futile task due to the significant gap between them. In gaming terms, it was as if an identification spell resulted in nothing but question marks. From this perspective, Shiyuan City likely wasn't very large, certainly not when compared with the transcendents Fu Qian had met at the Night Watchman base. In terms of strength, these two still passed as rather weak. If the field agents were of this caliber, the overall strength was likely worrisome. As the standoff continued, a grunt received a message. After a brief conversation, he pulled his comrade aside for a quiet discussion, stealing occasional glances at Fu Qian. Fu Qian had little interest in eavesdropping, but unfortunately, the two grunts were speaking so loudly it was clear as day. "The captain has asked us to keep the situation under control, leave everything as it is, don't do anything, and wait until Su Jiyan arrives to discuss further." "Don't do anything. We just stand here and watch." The common soldier obviously wasn't pleased. "That's what the captain said, it's Su Jiyan's request. You'd better not mess around, I certainly don't want to offend that lady." "Fine." In the end, the common soldier agreed reluctantly, but his look at Fu Qian was quite resentful. That lady. Fu Qian suddenly became interested. He knew the configuration of the night watchman in most areas. For more minor places, the night watchman team was usually small-scale, consisting of the captain and a few formal team members, with the captain being the highest authority in the area. So an unexpected guest had arrived who made the captain cooperate unconditionally. From the tone of the two men, they seemed quite wary of this individual. This abnormal situation might well be related to his own mission. Fu Qian, who had been planning to leave, decided to wait a little longer. Time ticked away slowly, and in the silence, it seemed to move especially slowly. Yet, no one complained, everyone sat solemnly in their place, disciplined as if they were elementary school students. Finally, after a long wait, someone came in through the door. Fu Qian looked up and was momentarily stunned. Dark narrow hood, long curved sword. Skin whiter than snow, delicate as porcelain. Air. That is porcelain. Looking at that familiar half-face, Fu Qian recalled someone who had fiercely struck him 3 times. Was her name Su Gao? To be reasonable, it had only been a few days since he last saw her. But it felt like a long time ago. Compared to their last encounter, she looked the same, her expression as blank as a puppet's face. However, the porcelain covering her face seemed to have spread even more, high collars couldn't hide it at all. But that wasn't the point was that this was the first time he had seen someone he encountered in a previous containment mission. If he remembered correctly, at the end of containment mission 2-133, neither Su Gao nor the captain had sustained fatal injuries. Su Gao, with her tall and slim figure, stood there, and even though she didn't bring out any chill like before, a nameless killing intent made the restaurant quieter still. The pair of common soldiers approached her cautiously, completely void of their earlier complaints. Without needing their reminder, Su Gao directly went over to the victimized young woman and observed carefully. After a long time, she finally looked up, as if deep in thought. Executioner Yan, besides the victim, we found one suspicious person here. The common soldiers had been holding their breath and focused, not daring to interrupt. At that moment, the first common soldier finally couldn't help but speak out. While speaking, he pointed towards Fu Qian. Hearing the accusation against him, Fu Qian kept silent. He was very curious about Su Gao's reaction upon seeing him. That represented the answer he cared about most. If she recognized him, wouldn't it to some extent indicate that his previous experiences hadn't been just a mere illusion, but had left tangible marks in this world? Following the direction pointed by the common soldier, Su Gao let out a cry of surprise. Fu Qian keenly noticed that her ordinarily still features became animated for a moment, and it seemed as if a dazzling galaxy flashed through her eyes. Fu. Mr. Fu. Chapter 58, Chapter 58, Chapter 57, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 3_1. Chapter 58, Chapter 57, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 3_1. The night watchman stared at Fu Qian incredulously for a long time. After confirming that he wasn't seeing things, Su Gao bowed deeply to Fu Qian. And with Su Gao's bow, the restaurant fell silent once again. The self-proclaimed expert actually knew Executioner Yan. Moreover, judging by Executioner Yan's demeanor, he seemed to hold him in high regard. This change left the two ordinary soldiers dumbfounded, with the elder one's mouth hanging open in shock. Fu Qian wasn't concerned about this at all. He actually still remembers me. This warehouse is really not simple at all. I haven't had the chance to thank you for the last operation before you disappeared. Afterwards, I thought that if it weren't for Mr. Fu's guidance, the consequences would have been unimaginable. We tried to look for you afterward but never found any trace of you. We even thought that the injuries on you had flared up. It's really great to see that you're okay. Su Gao was visibly agitated, spewing words that she might have kept inside for a whole year. Thank you for your concern. So they all remember, huh? And from what he said, after I completed the mission, my teleportation seemed to them like a sudden disappearance. They didn't notice any special anomalies. A multitude of information flashed through Fu Qian's mind in an instant, but on the outside, he just nodded and casually greeted. And there's no need for such formality, just call me Fu Qian. I also thought I was a goner last time. I didn't expect to be so fortunate to survive. My injuries have healed a long time ago, and I can only say that what goes around comes around. Fu Qian unabashedly promoted himself as being on the side of justice without blushing. Aha. In response to Fu Qian's vague statements, Su Gao had no doubts, only nodding seriously in agreement. Then she suddenly thought of something, her eyes lighting up. You appearing here this time, you wouldn't have come to handle the evil omen, would you? Indeed. Just as he had expected, this would save him a lot of trouble, and Fu Qian nodded his head in extreme satisfaction. This person's goals were aligned with his own. A look of pleasant surprise appeared on Su Gao's face as a wave of certainty solidified in her heart. That's fantastic. Her voice even had a tinge of excitement, but she quickly regained her composure, pointing in the direction of the beheaded woman. What do you think about this situation? I only came here to dine today, just keep doing what you're doing. Fu Qian had little interest in the bloodshed occurring before him and intended only to be an observer, thus he enigmatically replied. Understood. Su Gao didn't mind Fu Qian's evasion at all, again focusing her attention on the crime scene. Her last experience had given her an almost blind trust in Fu Qian. Mr. Fu. The two ordinary soldiers approached cautiously at this time. Su Gao's attitude towards Fu Qian had startled them. From the sound of it, this person even once gave substantial help to Executioner Yan. No wonder he exuded an aura of unfathomable depth. I am Lu Jun, an official member of the Night Watchman Squad of Shiyuan City. I was a bit disrespectful just now, please don't take it to heart. After hesitating repeatedly, Soldier finally apologized earnestly. In the high martial world, the basic law of respect for the strong still prevails. Although as a member of the Night Watchman, Lu Jun was not necessarily afraid of Fu Qian, respect for the powerful was almost something etched into his bones. It's no problem. Fu Qian would not bother himself with this gentleman, for he always considered himself a reasonable person. He was very clear about how much hatred his previous self-absorbed attitude at the crime scene could draw, and it was only natural to arouse suspicion. If this gentleman had shown no reaction at all, that would have been an incompetence of its own. Seeing that Fu Qian was so easy to talk to, Brother Lu Jun visibly relaxed, refocusing on the case at hand. The situation has been clarified. The victim's name was Gung Yu, a married woman. The lunch today had been reserved 2 weeks in advance, but the other person never showed up, and she had been waiting here for about half an hour. Based on the injuries, we confirm this is the work of a transcendent, and it's very likely to be the evil omen we're searching for. It's indeed the method of a transcendent, but we cannot be certain it's the work of evil omen just yet. Su Gao nodded. Although killing in public places to incite fear resembles the modus operandi of evil omen, we still should not jump to conclusions too soon. You guys proceed with the investigation as you would with a normal transcendent murder case. Okay. Lu Jun hastened to agree, and it was evident that Su Gao exerted substantial pressure on the two night watchmen, as both of them spoke with extreme caution. The fact that the other reserved party never arrived is very abnormal. We've decided to start from there, such as first finding her husband. What do you think? As Lu Jun asked this, Su Gao's demeanor naturally turned towards Fu Qian, seeming to seek his opinion. Don't look at me with that expression. She's seeking your opinion, you know. What's with that fanatic fan attitude? With a professional like me here, have you just given up on thinking? Fu Qian thought for a moment. Looking for the husband is always the correct move, but you should also investigate the individual who didn't show up. Perhaps there are more valuable clues there. Are you suggesting that the one who didn't show up isn't her husband? Lu Jun looked shocked. You're not married, are you? Fu Qian looked at him as. He shook his head. How did you know? What do you mean? It's obvious from your naive way of thinking. Do you have some overly high expectations for marriage? Fu Qian sighed. A married woman, booking a restaurant half a month in advance, dressing up, arriving early to wait for her husband, and then waiting for half an hour without pulling out a knife to kill anyone, what kind of dream do you think it takes to imagine that possibility? After successfully enlightening a young man about the harsh realities of marriage, the group left the restaurant where the incident occurred. As for the body of the victim, since she was an ordinary person and all the necessary information had been gathered, the local security officers would take care of the rest. The night watchmen had their own set of rules for such matters. After the last operation, I applied to join the executioner group, which specializes in capturing transcendent criminals. Evil Omen is my first target. This guy is quite powerful, acting recklessly, killing people based on his whims, and his targets are not limited to transcendence. His movements are mysterious, and to date, we still know very little about him. Since he quickly moves on after committing a massacre in one place, we currently can only identify him by his method of operation. I've been tracking Evil Omen all the way here. On the way back to the night watchman base, Sugao briefly outlined the current situation. From the information she provided, it was clear that Evil Omen was not easy to handle. Even the night watchmen, who were renowned for their capabilities, did not know his name. It was bound to be difficult to find him. Furthermore, one thing that particularly concerned Fu Qian was that the purpose of his mission this time was clear: to eliminate Evil Omen before a disaster occurred. This disaster surely did not refer to the killing sprees of Evil Omen, so what could it be? And what was its relation to Evil Omen? Chapter 59, Chapter 59, Chapter 58, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 4_1. Chapter 59, Chapter 58, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 4_1. Sugao's words were as sparse as ever, and seeing that Fu Qian was deep in thought, she maintained her silence and did not speak further. The two night watchmen had already stopped by the home of the decapitated woman for an investigation, leaving only the two of them in the car. Fu Qian took note of the scenery outside. It must be said that the place was still quite picturesque, with ancient-style buildings, bustling crowds, and leisurely strolls in the warm sunshine. It was hard to imagine any disaster befalling them. They were on their way to the night watchman base in Shiyuan City. Sugao had just mentioned that the night watchman base here had some information about evil omens, and suggested that Fu Qian might want to take a look. Naturally, Fu Qian was more than eager to do so. As the world's most deserving first organization, getting some information about targets from the night watchman would be great for him. Unable to come up with any leads about the disaster, Fu Qian refocused his attention on Sugao. Curved sword resting on her lap, Sugao sat quietly, and one could hardly sense the presence of a living person in her. Less than a third of the flesh on her face was real, the rest was exposed bone as white as porcelain, almost making her appear like a dilapidated life-sized doll. But Fu Qian knew very well that compared to last time, her strength had increased by more than just a little bit. It was difficult to imagine what had happened in between. Executioner Yen, such a title sounded murderous and suggested a high status within the Night Watchman organization. It seemed to be the role of a hunter, not limited by location, pursuing criminals everywhere. According to Sugao, she had applied to join this special division after the last incident. The impact of that incident on her was surely not as trivial as she had described. However, since she did not bring it up herself, Fu Qian would not ask. So now you're like a hunter, specifically pursuing targets that are on the night watchman's list. Yes. Sugao lowered her eyes and nodded lightly. It feels like I am more suited for this kind of work. This kind of work? Hunting. Then you truly are among the top experts. Fu Qian touched his chest, foregoing other aspects. The girl's knife skills were remarkably ferocious. Of course, this was undoubtedly a good thing for him. A powerful teammate of at least middle tier, and even a member of a special operations department, was perfectly suited for the task at hand. During their conversation, they had already reached the night watchman base of Shiyuan City. Unlike the grand and imposing building of Qi Shui and his team, this place appeared much more modest. An old, dark red, three-story building, which from the outside looked quite old. Executioner Yen, how is the situation? No sooner had they entered than someone came out to meet them. The man appeared to be in his 40s, with slightly graying temples and very casual clothes. The newcomer seemed surprised to see Fu Qian, puzzled how an extra person had come back from the trip. Thus, his gaze turned to Sugao, hoping she would explain. It was definitely done by a transcendent, but we can't confirm yet if it's the evil omen. Sugao nodded. Captain Qiao, please help me get the information on the evil omen. The captain. So this person was the person in charge of Shiyuan City. Fu Qian sized up this Captain Qiao before him, who indeed seemed a notch stronger than Lu Jun and the others, probably around 7th phase. Shiyuan City was not large, but no matter what, the staffing of the night watchman here seemed excessively meager. Hearing that Sugao wanted to see the evil omen files again, Captain Qiao clearly showed some confusion. After hesitating for a moment, he still mustered the courage to address Fu Qian. This is Mr. Fu. Without waiting for Fu Qian to respond, Sugao immediately said. And then what? Captain Qiao looked expectantly at Sugao for a few seconds, hoping she would say more, but unfortunately, she seemed to be sparing with words, just looking at him. In the end, Captain Qiao could not withstand the pressure and went to fetch a file from the back. Thank you. Su Gao reached out and took it without hesitation, immediately handing it over to Fu Qian. Captain Qiao's eyes bulged in astonishment. This was all secret information. But remembering the rumors about this man who would attack without a word, he still held back and dared not speak. And it really was only a tiny bit of information. Fu Qian felt the thin stack of a few pages in his hand, the majority of which were the crime records of Evil Omen. As for his personal information, except for being a man, there was almost nothing. However, from these crime records, an obvious taste of savage killing could be made out. Most of the bodies were disfigured and mutilated, some even missing internal organs, with the notes mentioning possible consumption. Why is this guy called Evil Omen? Fu Qian flipped through the information quickly and was reminded of a question. He claimed that name himself. Su Gao explained softly on the side. The target once left a similar message after committing a crime, and from then on, that name became the standard reference. It looks like his targets are still primarily transcendents. He had just noticed that most of the victims were still transcendents, with very few ordinary people involved. Yes, but there seems to be almost no commonality among the victims. At present, it seems he kills just for the sake of killing. In fact, if you include the recent incident, this is already the second time Evil Omen has acted in Shiyuan City. The first victim was also a transcendent. It feels like his frequency of committing crimes is getting higher. Fu Qian turned his head towards Captain Qiao. Captain Qiao, may I see the list of transcendents? The list of transcendents. Fu Qian's request made Captain Qiao blink. The list of all transcendents within Shiyuan City, I believe you definitely have it. We do, but... Captain Qiao still wanted to struggle, but a glance from Su Gao made him instantly shut his mouth. Huang Lejian, Wang Jianyuan, Wang Zhaoliu. Fu Qian leafed through the roster in front of him, his frown deepening. Why are they all surnamed Huang? You don't know. Captain Qiao was equally surprised. The Huang family is one of the top transcendent families at present. Although Shiyuan's Huang family is just a branch, their legacy has been around for over 100 years, it's normal for them to have some accumulations. Moreover, Shiyuan itself isn't very large, so indeed the vast majority of transcendents are from their family. So that's how it is. Such local powers could easily monopolize the cultivation resources, and through bloodline inheritance, it wasn't surprising to see them dominating the roster. Looking at it, more than half of Shiyuan's transcendents were from the Huang family. They had been in operation for 100 years, such a family was probably an all-powerful presence locally. Could it be this was why the Night Watchman had such a poor lineup here? Some tacit understanding between the two sides. But this wasn't important. With such a family in existence, it was really too good. A transcendent family that has been entrenched locally for 100 years would definitely have very reliable information. With the right motive, they would certainly work very efficiently. Have you had contact with them? Fu Qian asked, looking at Su Gao, who shook his head. I've only just arrived as well. In that case. Fu Qian pondered for a moment. Make time for a visit. Unaware of Fu Qian's background, Captain Qiao frowned and offered a reminder. Although we don't need to concern ourselves with these local forces, be careful when dealing with them. We can save a lot of effort if they are willing to cooperate. Don't worry. Fu Qian recalled his previous encounter with Ji Liu's Huang and others in the furnace. I have plenty of experience dealing with them. Chapter 60, Chapter 60, Chapter 59, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 5_1. Chapter 60, Chapter 59, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 5_1. By the way, are there any common natural disasters around Shiyuan? As he handed back the roll call to Captain Qiao, Fu Qian seemed to ask casually. How could there be? Captain Qiao was clearly puzzled by Fu Qian's question. Although Shiyuan City is not very large, it has existed for several hundred years and has always been known as a leisure destination. We don't even have severe weather, let alone natural disasters. If I had to mention something related to natural disasters, there is a volcano crater located 10 kilometers from the city area, but it has never erupted as far as records show. An extinct volcano erupting. That could be considered a disaster. However, Fu Qian always felt that it was not that simple. While he was thinking, someone came in from outside, it was Lu Jun and his colleague returning. How did it go? Captain Chiao had obviously been holding back for a while and hurriedly asked. So far, it seems there's no problem. Lu Jun shook his head. The deceased's husband is named Ryu Sheng, also a local, and childhood sweethearts with the deceased. They've just been married for 2 years and have always had a good relationship. He was at home when the incident occurred. Most importantly, the guy is an ordinary person. They had a good relationship. Fu Qian looked at Lu Jun with a strange expression on his face. Yes. Does he know about the lunch? He does not. Fu Qian sighed and suddenly stood up amidst the shocked gazes of those present. Let's go have a look. Look at what? Lu Jun clearly didn't grasp the meaning of Fu Qian's words. A husband whose wife has died and yet you feel there are no suspicions about him, I suddenly find that quite interesting. Take me to see him. In the suburbs of Shiyuan City. Is this the place? Fu Qian looked at the uniquely styled villa in front of him. Yes. Lu Jun answered with a grave voice, still not understanding why Fu Qian insisted on looking again. As for the reason Fu Qian gave, in his view, it seemed to be a dark train of thought. It seems that this model couple has a fairly good economic situation. Fu Qian scanned the surroundings. Yes, Ryu Sheng made his fortune in business abroad a few years ago and purchased the property here. That's also when the two of them got married. Fu Qian nodded and looked at the tightly closed gate. Call them out. Lu Jun pressed the doorbell somewhat reluctantly. However, after pressing it several times, there was still no response. Lu Jun's expression began to change. But before he could do anything else, with a flash of a blade, the gate opened on cue. Seeing the imposing Su Gao holding a knife, all the night watchmen felt a chill and not a single one dared to speak. Lu Jun was the first to rush into the house, quickly discovering that it was completely empty. The mess on the ground indicated that the owner of the house had left in a hurry. Could it really be related to him? But he's clearly just an ordinary person. Lu Jun was obviously beginning to doubt his life choices. Fu Qian didn't respond to him, but instead looked around the place and finally stopped in front of a tightly closed door. Compared to other places, this door had a distinctly different design and appeared to be much sturdier. Without a word from him, the blade flashed again, and the metal door opened in response. From this side, it looked like the space behind was some kind of workshop. These two. Seeing the two of them cooperating with such unspoken, overbearing actions, the 3 night watchmen were at a loss for words. Su Gao didn't seem to care about the night watchman's feelings at all and, after opening the door with a slice, he directly entered, rummaged around, and took out a string of items. It was a collection of various small pieces of jewelry, all uniquely crafted and characterized by patterns that were oddly shaped. This is. Captain Chiao looked surprised, clearly recognizing the value. Jewelry inscribed with talismans, some still in the process of being made. They're not much used to transcendence, but some rich people like spending money on such items for a slight boost in vitality or physical enhancement. These could not possibly be made by an ordinary person. Hearing the captain's words, Lu Jun and the other exchanged a look, utterly shocked. To make things like these, this Ryu Sheng is an unregistered transcendent. He must have used some method to conceal his presence before. Get me this person's information, we should check his recent activities. Listening to Su Gao's order, Lu Jun nodded with a defeated expression. Normally speaking, if a married woman is victimized, you would find a lot of suspicion on her husband, that's the usual scenario. Fu Qian patted him on the shoulder, speaking earnestly and tediously. Fu Qian turned to look at Captain Chiao again, whose expression had become much more serious. It was entirely understandable, as helping the executioner group catch a fugitive was one thing, but a fugitive coming from one's own jurisdiction was another matter entirely, serious enough to be considered negligence of duty. Captain Chiao, take us to meet Shiyuan's Huang family. Captain Chiao was taken aback. Shouldn't we follow up on this Ryu Sheng first? It's better to work on both fronts. For some reason, Fu Qian just wasn't interested in this Ryu Sheng. According to Lu Jun's report, they hadn't found any information on the person who had stood up Geng Yu. There wasn't enough time for a slow investigation. Unraveling the mystery was fine, but when time was of the essence, startling the snake out of the grass was the right strategy. And as the local hegemon, Shi Yuan City's Huang family was the perfect tool for startling the grass. Of course, it would be even better if they were connected to the snake. Seeing Fu Qian's firm stance, Captain Qiao turned his gaze to Su Gao, only to find that the latter was even more determined. All right then. Captain Qiao agreed promptly, knowing the times. Soon, the manor of Shi Yuan's Huang family came into distant view. As an aristocratic family, their taste was indeed extraordinary. This seems to be the extinct volcano you mentioned earlier. Looking at the sprawling structures up the mountain, Fu Qian turned to Captain Qiao. They believe this place has good feng shui. They put in a lot of effort to quarry the mountain and reside here. The underlying message was that he better not make any inappropriate comments later. Anything else you'd like to remind me of? To ensure the purity of their bloodline and maximize the proportion of offspring who are transcendents, Shi Yuan City's Huang family has maintained intrafamily marriages like their main family for many years, so their appearances tend to have some distinct features. Got it, easy to recognize but hard to distinguish. In fact, it was evident from the level of importance given to Wenli earlier, any potential for transcendent powers to be passed on through bloodlines would surely bring back all these absurd practices. However, thanks to this, the proportion of transcendence in the entire Huang family is quite high. At least half of the young people have cultivation qualifications, with 1/4 able to practice the family's inherited emperor energy. Blood Lion Huang Jishuan hails from Shi Yuan City's Huang family. At just 40 years old, he has already reached the pinnacle of the 4th phase and is hoped to be the youngest transcendent to reach the high tier in decades. He won't make it. Upon hearing this, Su Gao, who had been resting with eyes closed, interjected indifferently. Chapter 61, Chapter 61, Chapter 60, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 6_1. Chapter 61, Chapter 60, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 6_1. Su Gao's casual remark sent Captain Qiao into silent shock. So domineering. Fu Qian looked at Miss Su with admiration on his face. With such utter certainty in her tone, she must have encountered the legendary blood lion. Yet, daring to make such a comment also proved his own feelings were right. Her strength had skyrocketed, probably not much less than Li Weishuan's had been before. In the silence, the car drove up to the plaza in front of the hillside villa, where people were already waiting to receive them. This familiar scene brought back memories. Fu Qian remembered the stone pillars he had broken at the Wen family mansion. However, compared to the Wen family's parvenu extravagance, the Huang family, as an old and profound transcendent family, was far superior. Though also featuring a plaza in front, it was nothing like the Wen family's brand new appearance. Pines and cypresses, shade-covered walkways, every brick and piece of wood seemed desperate to engrave the words, ancient heritage, on their face, emphasizing the point, we are not nouveau riche. The welcoming party on the plaza stood in orderly rows, led by a young man. But this man clearly did not look well, appearing gaunt and sallow-faced. Even though he was formally dressed, it couldn't hide the hollowness beneath his clothes. Fu Qian remembered Captain Qiao's description earlier, confirming without doubt that this was a legitimate member of the Huang family. But this image, tall and thin, skinny as a rake, he really did resemble Huang Zhaoyan from the furnace encounter, obviously of the same clan. Huang Jianyuan, the son of the current head of the family. Captain Qiao turned back to whisper, then stepped out of the car first. Huang Jianyuan and his entourage had already come over, and the two sides immediately engaged in an exchange of pleasantries, which seemed quite insincere. It was apparent from the outset that the two parties had previously gotten along quite well. Fu Qian wasn't surprised and followed behind Su Gao as he got out of the car. Huang Jianyuan was busy being courteous with Captain Qiao. When he saw Su Gao getting out of the car, he instinctively paused and turned to look at Captain Qiao. Captain Qiao, who are these two? This is Su Jiyan. Captain Qiao began by cheerfully introducing Su Gao, to which Huang Jianyuan's face lit up with excitement and he stepped forward with effusive praise and admiration. Unfortunately, the latter showed no interest in responding, leaving Huang Jianyuan's expression to stiffen by the end. And this is? Captain Qiao pointed at Fu Qian but suddenly hesitated. How should he introduce him? Apart from knowing his last name was Fu, he had no other information. Expert Fu. He didn't even know what Fu was an expert in. Fu Qian, Special Operations Consultant. Expert level. Fu Qian didn't wait for Captain Qiao to speak and introduced himself, then saw Huang Jinyuan's expression grow even stiffer. A special operations consultant. Since when did the night watchman have such a position? Huang Jinyuan's mind was filled with questions, but it was inappropriate to ask more, so he simply gave more praise. Please come in. Unfortunately, my father is out and has not returned yet, so he's unable to welcome you. After the formalities, Huang Jianyuan welcomed Fu Qian and the others into the hillside residence. Inside, the manor was filled with an antique charm, emanating an aura of understated luxury. Soon, fragrant tea was served, and it seemed like Huang Jianyuan had suddenly remembered something. Captain Qiao hasn't been here for a long time. Is there anything in particular bringing you this time? You can't ask me about it. Instinctively, Captain Qiao's gaze turned to Fu Qian. It was you who insisted on coming here, so you might as well speak. Su Gao did the same, apparently not intending to speak at all. The reaction of these two startled Huang Jianyuan. His gaze lingered on Fu Qian's face, unable to fathom just who this expert really was. Fu Qian suddenly became the center of attention. I did come here on a bit of business. As the crowd looked on expectantly, Fu Qian accepted the lead unhesitatingly, speaking with a smile on his face. This noon, an innocent woman was killed while eating, a bloody scene. There were eyewitnesses who claimed that the murderer fled into the Huang family, so I am here to seek your assistance with the investigation. Captain Qiao's smile instantly dissipated from his face. What the hell, we haven't even found the person yet, so how come when it gets to you, the murderer is already pinned down and even escaped into the Huang family? Isn't your way of seeking assistance a bit too special? Bang. Nonsense. Who is spewing such nonsense? Huang Jianyuan was also momentarily stunned before erupting in fury, smashing a high-quality table with his palm, sending wood chips flying everywhere. Our Huang family will absolutely not tolerate anyone wantonly slandering us. Accusing us of harboring a murderer, where is the evidence? Emperor energy. Facing Huang Jinyuan's rage, a large part of Fu Qian's attention was on the faint yellow glow emerging from him, feeling an inexplicable fear of sensing something. Jianyuan. Just as Huang Jianyuan was about to lose control, a person walked out from behind and halted him with a shout. The newcomer was clearly much older, looking just as withered and ill as Huang Jianyuan, but most importantly, their faces looked nearly identical as if cast from the same mold. It seemed this was Huang Leiji, the Huang family head who had not yet returned home. Truly deserving the title of the current family head, he was much stronger than his son indeed. By the looks of it, he was at least 6th phase and up, probably even stronger than the assassin Fu Qian had taken out in the furnace. After stopping his son, Huang Leiji stepped forward, seriously looking at Su Gao. Executioner Yen Su, we just learned that you pursued the evil omen all the way to Shiyuan City. If there's any assistance you need, please speak freely. Furthermore, please believe that our Huang family has absolutely no connection with the evil omen. Moments ago, they couldn't even recognize anyone, and now they are thoroughly aware of her whereabouts. We are also quite certain that no one fled to the Huang family regarding the noon incident. Please do not let us suffer from a groundless accusation. From beginning to end, old Master Huang didn't spare a glance at Fu Qian. It seemed he had already decided that it was pointless to reason with him, and was set on Su Gao making a statement. Evidence. In the face of pressure from old Master Huang, Su Gao remained expressionless, tersely uttering 2 words. If you believe you're innocent, we need your evidence. We're being wronged and yet still have to provide our evidence of being wronged. Even old Master Huang almost lost his temper, his body also flashing with a thick yellow glow. Without taking a step back, Su Gao's hand slowly moved to her waist. In that instant, the room was engulfed in a chilling killing intent so intense that it seemed the very air was filled with countless blades whirling, stinging people's skin. Thump thump, several people in the reception room collapsed instantly. Both Huang Jianyuan and Huang Leiji saw their emperor energy fade instantly, with the former nearly toppling over. How do you wish for us to prove it? Huang Leiji, pressing down on the table, barely withstood the mountainous killing intent. Before noon tomorrow. Su Gao didn't answer him, instead turning to leave directly, leaving everyone in the room feeling lost and dejected. As the killing intent dissipated, Huang Jianyuan thumped to the ground with a slump. Brilliant. As the chief action consultant, Fu Qian was highly satisfied with Su Gao's performance. Although there hadn't been specific communication beforehand, Su Gao clearly understood his intentions, achieving the perfect effect of startling the snake by thrashing the grass. Captain Chiao, who had been rendered speechless, opened his mouth but ultimately said nothing, silently following behind the two and catching up. Chapter 62, Chapter 62, Chapter 61, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 7_1. Chapter 62, Chapter 61, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 7_1. What are we to do? Even the night watchman must not bully others too far. They desperately try to sully our reputation. Watching the three people leave and finally catching his breath, Wang Jianyuan couldn't help but lower his voice and growl. Father, you really should say something. It's obvious that having grown so large, Wang Jianyuan has never been subject to such an indignity, thus his psychological resilience was perilously unstable. What to do? Huang Leiji, with a similarly ashen face, finally spoke after a long silence. Everyone out, dig 3 feet into the ground if you have to, until you find that murderer. If the night watchman wants proof, we'll give them proof. It was almost like biting into flesh as he finished the sentence. Huang Leiji gestured with his hand, and a shadow flashed out. Keep a close watch on him. He was pointing at the back of Fu Qian. He may not belong to the night watchman, but our Huang family won't be extorted by just anyone. This truly is a remarkable place blessed with outstanding people. As he left the Huang family estate, Fu Qian looked back at the gigantic mountain peak under the setting sun and let out a sigh of admiration. Captain Chiao offered a tight-lipped smile. The shock from earlier was too much, and at this moment, he couldn't even muster an awkward smile. Fu Qian gave him a look. The fact that it was Wang Jianyuan and not his father who had come out to greet them implied that the informant of the Huang family had not entirely divulged the situation here, which showed some restraint. The situation in Shiyuan City must be such that the upper echelon of the night watchman had an unspoken agreement with the Huang family. The deployment of someone like Captain Chiao to guard this place evidenced this point. The accusation was, of course, a concoction of his own, but regardless of whether the Huang family was wrong today, he couldn't afford to waste time bickering with them. He needed to get them moving. Before him lay not just a sadistic maniac, but also a potential disaster waiting to strike. As entities that thrived on the blood and flesh of others, these families bore their own responsibilities that couldn't be absolved with mere claims of innocence. It must be said, Su Gao was a smart man. Even without prior coordination. The moment he spoke up, he immediately took a firm stance, sparing Fu Qian a lot of trouble. As for whether the Huang family would act in desperation, Fu Qian had no concerns whatsoever. According to the information he had gathered before, while these aristocratic clans possessed formidable strength, they were absolutely no match for the top transcendent organization. In fact, Fu Qian wondered how such an organization could have been established in the first place, as it seemingly contradicted all sociological principles. The Huang family could have 100 times the courage, and still, Fu Qian wouldn't believe they'd dare to cross the night watchman. Prior agreements between the night watchman and them likely existed, but that was merely out of respect for a local power, allowing them a bit more leeway. But that might not be the case with him. Before even leaving the Huang family estate, Fu Qian had noticed a different kind of attentive gaze and was sure he had been followed. Ah. The informal title of a consultant expert really doesn't command respect, huh? By the time the three of them returned to the night watchman base, it was already dark. Neither Lu Jun nor his companion had returned. They were probably working overtime outside. The people from the Huang family were likely in the same boat. As the mastermind behind it all, Fu Qian stretched leisurely. He had done what needed to be done, now it was time to wait and see. Although the base wasn't large, it still had guest rooms for transitory personnel. After settling into his room, arranged by Captain Chiao, Fu Qian found the accommodation surprisingly good. The room size was unreasonably large, and it was fully equipped with all sorts of facilities. Even the walls were made of a special material, offering a safety factor off the charts, and if he wasn't mistaken, even the curtains seemed to have a noticeable sensory isolation effect. As long as he pulled the curtains, no one from the outside would have a clue about the slightest movement inside. Really sly, opulently ostentatious. With such a domineering organization, should I consider joining them for a position? Fu Qian thought to himself as he drew the curtains closed. I wonder if that tail who's been following me home is getting anxious. That very night, Fu Qian found out the answer. Waking up from his sleep, although he didn't turn on the light, he was quite certain something had slipped into his room. Sleeping had almost become a leisure activity for him, as he could now go days without sleep without any impact. But years of habit had given him a special fondness for his bed. This thing didn't seem to be a living creature. Fu Qian clearly sensed a pitch-black bug creeping in along the corner of the wall. It was indeed shaped like a bug, but its body seemed to be made of formless smoke. Most likely, it was a special tactic of some transcendent, created for the purpose of scouting. It seemed the person outside was truly impatient, daring to make a move within the night watchman base. The little bug crawled on the floor for a bit before it stopped, as though it was confirming whether he was in the room. Fu Qian held his breath and stilled his beating heart almost to a halt. Ever since he had activated the feast, such feats had become effortless for him. As expected, the little bug seemed to hesitate, unsure whether to move closer to check. After a short pause, the little bug finally began to move, inching closer towards the bed. Fu Qian had wanted to play with it a little longer, but the next moment, there was a slicing sound. A sharp blade of light penetrated the wall directly, cutting through the small bug with precision. The little bug was cleaved in two and then dissipated into a wisp of smoke. He could sense the consciousness connected to it shudder, and then swiftly retreat. Fu Qian sat up in bed, and then there was a knock at the door. He got up to open it and found Su Gao standing outside. "Mr. Fu, someone has been surveilling you," said Su Gao with utmost respect. "Do you want me to take care of it?" This was too much respect, wasn't it? To check with him before deciding whether to deal with the threat. It seemed that if he said the word, Su Gao was ready to eliminate the voyeur on the spot. "There's no need, they might still be of use." Fu Qian blinked. Today at the Huang family, he wasn't being arrogant without reason. "The owner of the small bug, I've memorized your aura." Hearing Fu Qian's words, Su Gao nodded and left silently without asking what he intended to use them for. Fu Qian closed the door and looked at the long gash in the wall. Su Gao indeed lived in the room next door. He could sense that she had returned to her room, still not sleeping, standing stiff next to the window, motionless. For an instant, she seemed to have no sign of life, turning into an actual puppet. Her condition is indeed quite special. The hole in the wall obviously couldn't escape the notice of Captain Chiao and the others. The next day when Fu Qian saw them again, although they looked serious with penetrating gazes, the occasional flicker in their eyes gave Fu Qian the feeling that they were burning with curiosity, probably spending half the time guessing about his relationship with Su Gao. Before he could say anything, Captain Chiao received a message and stepped outside. Then, he came back with a strange expression on his face. "The patriarch of the Huang family would like to visit, saying he has information to discuss with us." Chapter 63, Chapter 63, Chapter 62, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 8_1. Chapter 63, Chapter 62, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 8_1. Old Master Huang is quite efficient. Now. And he's coming directly to the base. The information brought by Captain Chiao stirred something in Fu Qian's heart. The attitude of Old Master Huang seems excessively proactive. Could it be that the Huang family has found something? Lu Jun couldn't help but say. Although he didn't follow them to the Huang family yesterday, his reaction this morning made it clear that Captain Chiao must have filled him in on the situation. Otherwise, he wouldn't look at himself as if seeing a ghost. It should be. Captain Chiao was somewhat elated. He was the one most hopeful that the Huang family would find some clue. Although the direction of the case had become somewhat out of control, any findings would make things easier to explain on Su Gao's side. If things were to come to a standstill, they wouldn't know how to handle what followed. Fu Qian made no comment but exchanged a glance with Su Gao. "Old Master Huang has worked hard, let's go greet him." As expected, Wang Leiji's expression was grave when he alighted from the vehicle, and he managed only a faint smile upon seeing Fu Qian and the others. "Executioner Yen, Mr. Fu, you both have had a hard time. Old Master Huang is well." Su Gao nodded his head lightly in greeting, while Fu Qian cheerily said hello and exchanged some pleasantries. "Not at all." This curt "not at all" nearly made Wang Leiji spit blood. From the news he had received, this guy indeed had not had a hard time. He had even gone straight to sleep upon his return. Because of his single remark, the entire Huang family was up the whole night like a disturbed henhouse, with hardly anyone having the time to rest, while this bastard slept comfortably. Ha. Relying on his many years of restraint as the family head, Huang Leiji quickly adjusted his mood and, pretending not to hear, casually made a few perfunctory remarks. Patriarch Huang has come so early, have you found something? Once the group was seated in the base, Captain Qiao couldn't help but inquire. Phew. Huang Leiji let out a breath of relief. After all that useless chit-chat, he had wanted to play it cool, waiting for Fu Qian to ask him about his progress first. Who would have thought that the guy would just beat around the bush with nonsense and steadfastly avoid the main point, almost making him burst with frustration. To tell the truth, we haven't found anything yet. The look of disappointment on Captain Qiao's face was almost impossible to conceal. If you found nothing, why come so early? However, Huang Leiji shook his head and sighed deeply. Our entire family mobilized yesterday, using all our resources to investigate, but unfortunately, we barely found any clues. I've come specially today to apologize to Executioner Yan. But please rest assured, Executioner Yan, as this involves the family's reputation, we will not give up on investigating this matter. It is also to clear our own name. Huang Leiji waved his hand, and a man walked out from the crowd behind him. From now on, Lejean will lead our family's elite members in continuing the investigation. With the consecutive heinous crimes occurring in Shiyuan City, the Huang family, as a local family, has an unshirkable responsibility. If Executioner Yan has any orders, please do not hesitate to give them, and we will cooperate fully. Huang Lejean. I've seen that name before. Fu Qian looked at the men who stepped forward, also thin as a reed, much younger than Huang Leiji, with facial features that bore a resemblance. It must be a brother or similar relation. If memory serves me correct, from the list I saw before, this Huang Lejean should currently be the leading figure of the Huang family in Shiyuan City. A fifth phase transcendent, a gold medal enforcer, a wielder of double red clubs. Dispatching the number one enforcer for us to command it will really does show a willingness to cooperate. The Huang family certainly knew about Su Gao's tracking of the evil omen, but they adopted a wait-and-see approach. After being slandered by me yesterday, in a situation with no hope of proving their innocence, they took the initiative to mend fences, sending family resources to actively assist with the investigation. It's a normal human reaction. But, is that really the case? Captain Qiao and his team clearly understood the meaning behind Huang Leiji's words, basically admitting that they hadn't been proactive enough before, but now they would fully cooperate. To get the Huang family to this extent, Advisor Fu's actions yesterday, although unreasonable, now seem not to be a bad thing. Huang Leiji finished speaking in one breath and stared straight at Su Gao, only to notice that the latter was looking at Fu Qian. Cough cough. Fu Qian cleared his throat. Old Master Huang is well-intentioned. Having the elite members of the Huang family assist with the investigation is indeed a great help. However, the situation has changed, and I'm afraid we no longer need it. Huh? How come it's not needed anymore? Perplexity, shock, indignation. The moment these words came out, Fu Qian was instantly surrounded by an array of gazes. Before the crowd could figure it out, Fu Qian's figure exploded into motion. Huang Lejean's body flashed with light, almost instantaneously blocking in front of Huang Leiji. Just when it seemed like Fu Qian had gone crazy and was about to start a fight, unexpectedly he leapt outwards, tearing through the sky in an instant. The next moment, a figure jumped up 100 meters away, running away frantically into the distance like a madman. However, Fu Qian's speed was as fast as lightning, and within a few breaths, he caught up, firing off several air bullets. His realm had improved tremendously, and so had the power of the air bullets. The figure in the air couldn't dodge in time, its body shook and suddenly became ethereal, turning into a mist-like form. The air bullets whistled through it, causing no substantial harm. Yet by this time, Fu Qian had already caught up to him, immediately stomping on the ground, sending a terrifying shockwave sweeping around. In an instant, the black mist that the figure had transformed into trembled, and the next moment the mist dissipated, revealing its true form. Clang! Fu Qian slapped away the pitch-black dagger that was thrust at him and grabbed the attacker by the neck, lifting them up like a small chicken. Under the gaze of the crowd, Fu Qian carried the person all the way back to the base and threw them in front of Huang Leiji. The blow just now had obviously inflicted heavy damage. The figure fell to the ground almost without reaction, hair scattering in disarray. It turned out to be a petite woman, quite young. The reason it's no longer needed is that I have already identified a suspicious person. Fu Qian nonchalantly took his seat again. I had spotted this person sneaking around following me yesterday, and even breaking into the base at night, exceedingly suspicious. By following this lead, we could surely find the trace of the evil omen. So there was such a thing. The night watchman trio heard this for the first time and were immediately taken aback. This was a serious matter. Huang Leiji's face went through several changes, gazing at Fu Qian for a long time with a complex expression. I don't understand what you're talking about. The woman on the ground spoke up at this moment. I was just passing by from outside. I have no idea about any of the things you just mentioned. Is that so? Then why did you run when you saw me? Fu Qian glanced at her. The woman was speechless for a moment. Advisor Fu. In the midst of the awkward silence, Huang Leiji finally spoke. You may have misunderstood. Xiaoying is a member of the Huang family's protective staff. She would never do something so offensive. Besides. He took a deep breath. I just received information on my end that someone related to yesterday's case has been found. I'll have them brought over in a while. Chapter 64, Chapter 64, Chapter 63, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 9_1. Chapter 64, Chapter 63, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 9_1. What? Huang Leiji suddenly changed his tune and discovered a clue, even going as far as to directly find the person, obviously shocking a group of people. If only he had done this earlier. Fu Qian shook his head. No matter what reasons Huang Leiji found, he did not believe that the Huang family, with all its power, would fail to find any clue. Failing to find the evil omen was one thing, but if they couldn't even find a third party who stood up a woman, then the Huang family had truly hit rock bottom over the past 100 years. Besides, Huang Leiji's behavior today was very abnormal. He showed up before the agreed time and directly admitted his mistake with a sincere attitude, even sending out his golden enforcers and elite team for dispatch. He was being far too humble. Combining these two things, there was only one explanation: they had found that person, and then, unfortunately, they discovered exactly what he had predicted, that the individual was indeed related to the Huang family. Considering that yesterday the patriarch of the Huang family boasted that there was absolutely no connection to them, this was a direct slap in the face. So, out of maintaining family honor, they prepared to show a proper attitude but stubbornly deny any wrongdoing. Unfortunately, there wasn't much time to play games with him. Then it seems I was mistaken. My apologies to this beautiful lady. Now that Huang Leiji had finally caved in, Fu Qian expressed shock and remorse with a serious face, formally apologizing to the woman called Xiaoying. Humph. The woman known as Xiaoying clearly wasn't in a good mood and responded with a snort. There was no need to look to know that this woman was the one who placed the bug in the room last night. The reason Su Gao hadn't been instructed to take care of her immediately was to deal with this kind of non-cooperation from the Huang family. Originally, the eyewitnesses and such were just casually mentioned to drag the Huang family into the mess, and if things escalated, Huang Leiji could claim defamation since there was no solid evidence. But this woman's crime of spying on the night watchman's movements was undeniable, and Su Gao could fully prove it. Now the Huang family was truly pinned down and unable to struggle. Huang Leiji was clearly aware of this and gave up defiantly. It must be said that the efficiency of the Huang family was not too shabby, as a crowd of people awkwardly waited for less than half an hour before a gentleman was brought in. This man was in his 20s, with a slick and powdered appearance, and the first thing he did upon entering the door was to rush to Huang Leiji, crying bitterly. However, even before he reached him, he was restrained and pulled back. Advisor Fu, this person is Huang Jinyong, the suspicious individual we found, the one whom the victim invited out yesterday. Huang Leiji introduced without a hint of embarrassment. Although he is a member of the Huang clan, considering the severity of the situation, I had someone bring him over immediately. Oh. Fu Qian looked down at Huang Jinyong, who was half kneeling, half lying on the floor. Do you know the woman named Geng Yu? This. Huang Jinyong instinctively looked up. Answer honestly to what you're asked. Huang Leiji's tone was icy cold. Now the Huang family had no face to speak of any longer, and covering up would only bring more embarrassment. Additionally, he had already carefully questioned this troublemaker and confirmed that he had no relation to the evil omen. Otherwise, he wouldn't risk covering for him, giving that Mr. Fu the opportunity to ride roughshod over them. I know her. Huang Jinyong was startled and answered honestly. Did she invite you to have lunch together yesterday? Yes. Then why did you murder someone and flee? No, I really didn't. I didn't even go there. How could I possibly murder someone? Huang Jinyong's voice was already tinged with a sob. Someone invites you out, and you don't go. Such behavior itself is very abnormal. Why should I believe you? It's true, it's really true. I have been dodging her for half a month. It's her who keeps pestering me, insisting that we meet up and talk. Dodging her? You might as well clarify things a bit more. Fu Qian looked up and saw not just one gossipy gaze but several, so he might as well give these people a thrill. It's like this. Huang Jinyong, terrified out of his wits, didn't dare conceal anything and quickly spilled the beans about his relationship with Gang Yu. According to him, Gang Yu was a woman he had hooked up with a year ago, and they had been carrying on secretly for over a year. In the interim, everything was as sweet as honey with good feelings between them, but recently, Gang Yu had become more ostentatious and wanted to ditch her husband for a life with just the two of them, so he started avoiding her. Ah, what a stirring tale of romance. I couldn't possibly be with her for real. I've been lying to her all along. Huang Jinyong wore a mournful expression. The only reason I could start something with her in the first place was that I told her I was a transcendent, but I'm not. And she believed you, just like that. I am a member of the Huang family. That explained it. Fu Qian nodded in understanding. Did she ever tell you about her husband's situation? Not much, just that he's a small businessman, very boring and often away on business trips, whereas she longs for the world of the transcendents. Fu Qian looked up to see that Captain Chiao and the other two wore stiff expressions. This guy was clearly a pushover, and what he said was most likely true. However, if what he said was true, then Gang Yu's husband was truly in a pitiable state. As a bona fide transcendent who had renounced his superior status to marry his childhood sweetheart and live an ordinary life, to have his wife cheat on him with a faux transcendent was tragic. What sort of torment-filled script was this? It's a great misfortune for the Huang family to produce such a disgraceful descendant. It truly tarnishes our family's reputation. I apologize for this and for causing laughter in front of you and Executioner Yan, said Huang Leiji, suddenly speaking up with a righteous demeanor. Let this man stay here to assist in the investigation, as we are not yet certain whether what he says is true. Upon hearing this, Huang Jinyong burst into fresh wails. Old Master Huang is truly prudent. Fu Qian made a polite remark, not bringing up what the other had said the day before. We're not the kind to nitpick, as long as our aim was achieved. Huang Jinyong himself was entirely unimportant. Fu Qian wasn't interested in their sordid love life. He always felt that Gang Yu's death wasn't likely to have much to do with the evil omen. This hubbub wasn't generated to fish for gossip. Fu Qian's objective was always the evil omen. So far, it seemed that no valuable information had been gleaned, but often a lack of results is a result in itself. As a family with a century of heritage, the Huang family, pushed to this point, could only offer up such a poor specimen. This suggested a possibility: the evil omen might be hiding within the Huang family itself. Think about it, a foreign transcendent would be exceedingly conspicuous, not to mention having to skulk around committing murder. How could they remain untraceable under such searching? Unless it was a case of hiding in plain sight, this individual lurking in everyone's blind spot, and possibly even utilizing the family's protection to cover their tracks. Next, it might be worth narrowing down the search in this direction. Let's hope there's still time. Just then, someone moved up beside Huang Leiji and whispered something in his ear. The latter's face changed instantly, and he addressed Fu Qian word by word. Someone in the Huang family has just been murdered. It might be the work of the evil omen. Chapter 65, Chapter 65, Chapter 64, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 10_1. Chapter 65, Chapter 64, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 10_1. Here they come. I knew there wouldn't be much time to search leisurely. The decision to push forward aggressively was indeed the right one. This is the intuition of a mission agent. Fu Qian nodded inwardly. At this moment, Huang Leiji's words, filled with grief and indignation, shocked the entire room, visibly turning the atmosphere heavy. Especially for the members of the Huang family, a prominent clan and a family of transcendence, it was likely the first time they had been so offended. They had thought that no matter how crazy that guy was, there would be a limit, and at most he would target some scattered fighters. Who would have thought he would actually dare to stir trouble right under the nose of Tai Sui? In an instant, the crowd was agitated, everyone bristling with murderous intent. Fu Qian understood their feelings very well and exchanged glances with Su Gao. "We should waste no time, let's go take a look immediately," he said. "Okay." Huang Leiji clearly couldn't sit still any longer, and a group of people hustled on their way. Compared to the previous day's visit, the atmosphere in the Huang family estate was much tenser. Following the path up the estate and almost reaching the top of the entire structure, the group finally arrived at the crime scene. It was a relatively secluded courtyard, with a group of people already waiting outside. Besides the visible grief, there seemed to be a trace of fear. Not far ahead, the door was wide open, revealing an extremely ferocious scene inside. On the white sheets, 2 bodies were flattened like tomatoes crushed by a hydraulic press, spread out thinly and smearing the bedding, with blood spattering all around, staining everything within sight. Not only that, but between the 2 bodies, hundreds of tangled sinews had grown, intertwined and wrapped around each other, inseparable. The entwined sinews not only adhered to the bed below but also stretched upwards, dense and overgrown like a dark red thicket. Bastard! Witnessing the shocking scene, Huang Leiji was first startled, then his eyes nearly burst with rage. Uncle Six has been out of public affairs for many years, yet someone dared to harm him this cruelly. No wonder it was so hidden, it turned out to be a retired person's care home. The scene was well secured, and Su Gao entered the room without a word. After examining the hellish scene carefully, she nodded to the crowd. "It's the handiwork of evil omen. The method of killing is not entirely the same as before, but some commonalities can be seen. Compared to the past, it's more brutal and the scent of sacrifice is getting stronger," she said. As a hunter who had been tracking this all the way, Su Gao's words carried a lot of weight. Evil omen. Huang Leiji's eyes were bloodshot, the sound of his teeth gritting painfully clear, making one wonder if he regretted his previous stance as an observer. Advisor Fu. As Fu Qian was sizing up the surroundings, Captain Qiao came over and quietly handed him a piece of paper. "We've verified it, this is Ryu Xing's recent movements. I must say, it's somewhat suspicious. He just returned from out of town not long ago, and the timeline coincides with evil omens. Could this really be such a coincidence?" Fu Qian took the paper and glanced at it without saying a word. Huang Leiji, however, had very sharp ears and turned to look. "Advisor Fu, do you have leads related to evil omen?" he asked. Fu Qian passed the file over without a word, and old Master Huang snatched it, his face turning an iron shade of blue. "The night watchman has such important information, why didn't you inform us earlier?" Huang Leiji stared at Fu Qian, his voice heavy with accusation. "Or is it that you don't trust the Huang family?" By the end, his tone was stern, it seemed he was truly infuriated. "He's merely a suspect at this point, far from confirmed," replied Fu Qian, unperturbed by the wrath of the Huang family head, then turned to address a nearby servant. "Did you discover the bodies?" he asked. The servant was taken aback. "No, Uncle Six does not like to be disturbed and always rests until close to noon before getting up." "Then who found them?" "It was a junior member of the clan who passed by and detected something abnormal, and he went directly to Jian Yuan." Huang Lejian, who was standing nearby, interjected. The top figure of the Huang family also had a very grim expression on his face. "Where is he?" Fu Qian's interest was piqued. He had previously narrowed the scope of suspects to the Huang family, and as is widely known, the first person to discover a scene often bears great suspicion. "Where is he now?" "What do you mean by that?" Huang Lejian looked at him with some displeasure. After the incident occurred, he went out with Jian Yuan to lead people in pursuit. "What's his name?" Advisor Fu seems to have a deep prejudice against our Huang family. Such a tragedy has occurred here, yet you immediately suspect a member of the Huang family. Old Master Huang huffed heavily, clearly at the end of his patience. However, before he could continue to express his dissatisfaction, someone rushed up in panic. In the next moment, Huang Leiji was dumbstruck on the spot. Jian Yuan. Had Huang Jianyuan met his end? Or was the entire team gone? Fu Qian remembered Huang Leiji's hot-tempered son, and a strong sense of foreboding surged in his heart. Instinctively, he looked up, and in the next moment, an incredibly eerie scene came into his view. Above the summit, a gigantic rust-colored tree slowly emerged. From the branches that soared into the sky directly from the volcanic crater, invisible tentacles extended and writhed, interweaving mouth-like flowers that blossomed and continuously tore and decayed. The moment this image entered his vision, Fu Qian felt as if his head had been struck by a heavy hammer, and his consciousness rippled. SAN points -1. SAN points -1. SAN points -1. In the midst of the terrifying warnings, Fu Qian seemed to hear whispers from the depths of his soul, tempting him to keep staring, to lose his consciousness in it. Finally, before his mind completely collapsed, Fu Qian forcibly resisted the impulsive call from the depths of his soul and turned his head away, pulling his gaze back. Phew! Was this the legendary calamity? Fu Qian shook his head, which felt like it was about to explode, and glanced around. In the line of people in front of him, at least half were looking in the direction of the mountaintop, including the Huang brothers. All these people stood there perfectly rigid, silent, motionless. This odd behavior naturally attracted the attention of others. The people who noticed something was off reacted by looking up to see if there was something in the sky. Thus, within the span of a breath, the rest were similarly afflicted. What's going on outside? Su Gao, who was still inside the room, obviously sensed something was off. Don't look up. Fu Qian casually warned, and then slapped Huang Lejian on the back, who was looking up at the sky, making use of the last bit of time. What's his name? Fu Qian looked at him and asked again. Who? Huang Lejian, his eyes vacant, raised his head and muttered. The person who found the body. Huang Yuanchang. His eyes were utterly devoid of life, his consciousness seemingly shattered. Calamity has arrived, containment failed. Current SAN points, 42. The prompt in his ear sounded, and the scene before his eyes quickly blurred. Chapter 66, Chapter 66, Chapter 65, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 11_1. Chapter 66, Chapter 65, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 11_1. The legendary disaster actually looked like this. Back in the familiar warehouse, Fu Qian closed his eyes, recalling the scene he had just witnessed. Merely glancing at it caused his SAN points to drop continuously. The flesh tree that appeared on the mountain top must be of a fairly high rank. In just that brief moment, he lost a full dozen or more SAN points. The last time he encountered a similar situation was with that spawn of the evil god. If he hadn't upgraded to a 2/3 thug, greatly increasing his mental resistance, his SAN points would have been almost depleted just now. Was that tree the object of sacrifice behind the evil omen? Recalling how the members of the Huang family stood rigidly, looking up at the sky, the sight was truly bizarre and abnormal. And Shiyuan City as a whole was probably no different. Perhaps some people didn't see it at first, but like just now, those who were affected couldn't warn others, and those unaffected always wanted to see what was going on. In the end, they would line up one by one to become idiots, leaving a city of walking corpses. Is this the true form of a calamity? It's definitely more imaginative than a volcanic eruption. And much more terrifying. So, the evil omen continuously killed and sacrificed people just to bring this thing to come forth. No, not necessarily to come forth. Like that time with the spawn of the evil god, creating such a big impact and still needing a carrier to have a chance of birth. How could such an existence, which seems much more terrifying, possibly descend upon us by killing a few transcendents? Maybe it's always been there, simply imperceptible, untouchable, and uncommunicable. And what the evil omen has been doing is not making it descend, but making it seen. By constantly torturing and sacrificing, the evil omen accumulated enough power after killing Huang Jianyuan and his group, removing some kind of barrier, making the tree appear before everyone. The dangerous evil omen is lurking, and with it, calamity converges. Is this the true meaning of lurking? Regardless, losing a dozen or more SAN points in one go means this trip could be considered a heavy loss. But it wasn't entirely without gain, at least he got a name. Huang Yuanchang. Fu Qian recalled the roster he had seen earlier, and the name was on it. If he remembered correctly, this person was also a transcendent from the Huang family, but with mediocre talent, unable to cultivate the family's inherited emperor energy and thus not considered a core member of the family. Given the current situation, his suspicions could be said to be extremely high. The mission timeline was much tighter than he had anticipated. There was no time to eliminate every possibility one by one. Next time, he would go straight for him as the target, kill him first and ask questions later. As long as he avoided looking up at the sky, he had enough chances to try and err. Speaking of which, Fu Qian always had a question in his mind. With this type of mission, the difficulty usually lies in finding the person. Once the target is locked, the rest is simply a matter of how to crush them. Even without thinking, just by repeating the process several times, using the process of elimination could easily lock down the target. Theoretically, it is still the simplest type of mission. So why does the introduction contain the phrase, regardless of whether there is a way, that sounds so desperate? Could it be that the evil omen is so strong that it's completely impossible to kill? Impossible. If it were indeed an invincible entity, they would have simply gone on a rampage. Why bother being chased and forced to dodge and hide by the night watchman? As Fu Qian pondered, he once again touched the mist gate. 1 SAN point consumed, attempting containment again, current SAN points 41. 1%, 3%, 7%, 15%, 31%, 63%, 100%, containment scene loading complete. Sir, please enjoy your meal. The familiar voice rang in his ears. Fu Qian opened his eyes, and the restaurant where the bloodshed had occurred appeared before him again. Inhaling the aroma of the food deeply, Fu Qian did the same as he had done last time, picking up the work meal from the plate and putting it into his mouth to soothe his wounded heart. While enjoying the food, he looked in the direction of the incident based on his memory. In the corner of the restaurant, a young and slender figure in a black dress sat upright, her back elegantly poised, and the position opposite her was empty, just as he had seen before. And the next moment, as if growing impatient with the wait, the figure picked up the cup on the table and took a sip. He actually didn't die. Fu Qian's eyes sharpened. Compared to last time, his actions hadn't changed at all, yet a person who was supposed to be dead was now alive. Something was off with this world line. It was his first time encountering such a situation. Fu Qian tried looking outside the restaurant, and soon noticed Lu Jun and company passing by. However, these two showed no intention of coming in, instead hurrying away. Last time, they must have noticed something odd in the restaurant and that's why they entered, but this time, possibly because Gang Yu hadn't died, they didn't come in. What could be the reason? Fu Qian's mind began to race. Compared to last time, his behavior could be said to have no difference, and in theory, it shouldn't have any effect on the normal course of events. Moreover, based on last time's experience, this woman should have died before he regained awareness, otherwise, it made no sense that he hadn't noticed the killing process at such a close range. But this time she definitely hadn't died. Something must have caused this situation. Wait a minute, experience. An idea flashed through Fu Qian's mind. If there was any difference between himself now and last time, it was that in the last attempt, he had learned a few names. For instance, Wan Yuanchang, for instance, Ryu Sheng. Just because he knew the names of the evil omen, this woman hadn't died. Su Gao had once mentioned that evil omens have an animal-like intuition for danger, which is how they repeatedly escaped from the night watchman. If these changes were due to that, then the gift of the evil omen might be more than just intuition. This mission was getting more and more interesting. Fu Qian thought for a moment, then stood up and walked straight towards the woman in the corner, pulling out the chair opposite her and sitting down. I'm sorry, I'm waiting for someone. Gang Yu, clearly in a bad mood and about to impatiently shoo the person away, suddenly realized that the wine glass in her hand had somehow ended up in the hands of the man opposite her. Drinking before meals isn't good for your health. Fu Qian looked into the cup as if nothing was amiss. Miss, are you waiting for someone? This guy is no ordinary person. Gang Yu's eyes lit up, and after 3 seconds, she sighed, shook her head, and appeared on the verge of tears. Yes, but I'm afraid that person won't be coming. That's really quite rude. Fu Qian nodded and scanned her from head to toe, not missing any detail. Feeling his piercing gaze, Gang Yu was secretly thrilled and quickly adjusted her emotions, doing her utmost to present herself in the most graceful manner possible. After observing for a while, Gang Yu felt smug, her lips curled slightly as she was about to speak, only to see the wine glass being pushed back towards her. Then you should drink a little more. Gang Yu was momentarily confused and had not realized what had happened before Fu Qian had already drifted away. Indeed, there was something special around her neck. Fu Qian, leaving the venue, recalled the scene he had just witnessed. On Gang Yu's delicate and slender neck, there was a barely detectable ripple of energy. It originated from a transparent pattern beneath the necklace, barely distinguishable from the skin. It wasn't noticeable at all without close inspection. The pattern encircled her neck, the texture somewhat similar to what he had seen in Ryu Xing's small workshop before. 99.9% chance that it was drawn by her husband, Ryu Xing, unbeknownst to her. And this object imbued with talismanic power would activate at a certain time, neatly severing her head from her neck. Chapter 67, Chapter 67, Chapter 66, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 12_1. Chapter 67, Chapter 66, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 12_1. Why didn't the talisman activate on time this time? Fu Qian walked down the street, pondering this question. Now it was almost certain that Gang Yu had been killed by her husband. First of all, the talisman composed of patterns was quite distinctive, and Ryu Xing undeniably had such ability and sufficient motive. Moreover, apart from him, it was hard to imagine who else could have managed such a troublesome thing on the victim's neck. However, this discovery left Fu Qian somewhat puzzled. He had never thought of Ryu Xing as an evil omen, but the fact that Ryu Xing's original murderous behavior changed immediately after his own appearance was somewhat inexplicable. There must be some connection between Ryu Xing and the evil omen, but it was still impossible to confirm at the moment. But that wasn't a problem. If it was uncertain, just ask directly. Fu Qian had originally planned to go directly to Huang Yuanchang, but this small change made him change his mind at the last minute. Ryu Xing should still be at home now. Following the address in his memory, Fu Qian didn't take much effort to find the love nest of Ryu Gang. He pressed the doorbell, and soon the door opened from the inside. A young man under 30, with a lean face, hid behind the door, frowning at Fu Qian. Who are you looking for? This must be the protagonist of the torture text. He was indeed a transcendent, no doubt about it, although the guy used some means to conceal most of his aura, a trace scent that remained exposed him. Considering his current situation, he was unlikely to cooperate and answer questions obediently, so why not? Is this Ryu Xing's home? Watched by wary eyes, Fu Qian was nevertheless composed. I am Ryu Xing, but I don't know you. Ryu Xing's eyes constantly scrutinized Fu Qian, clearly very vigilant. With his hand covering the door to prevent Fu Qian from entering. I'm not here to find you. Fu Qian shook his head, looking inside. Gang Yu arranged to meet with me here, where is she? Almost in an instant, Fu Qian noticed that Ryu Xing's knuckles on the door had turned white from the pressure. Who are you? Ryu Xing's features twisted, as he glared at Fu Qian through clenched teeth. That's wrong, she told me it would be this time. Fu Qian frowned in confusion, seemingly completely oblivious to Ryu Xing's gritted teeth. I am Qin Mingzi, didn't Gang Yu mention I was coming over today? No, what do you want with her? Ryu Xing asked stiffly. Personal matters, may I come in and wait? Sure, come in. Perhaps as a counter-effect of reaching the peak of anger, Ryu Xing's tone had calmed down as he slowly opened the door. When will Gang Yu probably return? Fu Qian entered unceremoniously, sat down on the couch, and asked. I am not sure, you might want to wait a moment. Ryu Xing's voice was cold from behind him. What's your relationship with Gang Yu? Relationship? Well, that's a bit complicated. Fu Qian answered very honestly. While speaking, his hand reached out and grabbed something. When he opened his palm, there was a small crossbow bolt, its tip glinting with a strange cold light. This thing had just been aimed at his own back, shot out while using his voice as a cover, and it was quite tricky. Your way of treating guests is a bit special. Fu Qian turned to look at Ryu Xing. Indeed, you're not normal either. Ryu Xing's calm demeanor had vanished, his eyes were bloodshot, and his expression was ferocious. I should have thought of this earlier, that bitch just can't stop being a scumbag. Ryu Xing let out a cold laugh. Think you're safe just because you weren't hit? Look at your hand. Fu Qian looked down and noticed that the gleaming arrowhead was covered with layers of intricate patterns. These black patterns, alive like creatures, had somehow crawled onto his skin and were spreading exponentially in all directions. In that brief moment, they had covered his entire right hand. Wherever the patterns spread, the skin visibly lost its luster, turning into a cold, lifeless thing. Interesting, where did you learn this from? You care about that at this moment. Ryushing paused, then erupted into sharp, shrill laughter. You guys, is the only thought in your mind how to become stronger? Have you lost all human cognition besides that? Too bad, I'm not like you. These things are considered priceless treasures to you, but for me, they're a curse. Ever since I was a child, these patterns have appeared in every dream of mine, and every time I close my eyes, I see them. One day, on a whim, I drew these things down and combined them intuitively, only to discover some bizarre effects, making me more aware of my own difference. But this is not what I want. I just want to live a normal life. I don't want my lover to think of me as a monster. Oh, but unexpectedly, lovers like monsters, don't they? Fu Qian's words almost made Ryushing choke. Still talk tough when death is upon you, let me tell you your fate. Your body will stiffen inch by inch, breath will be paralyzed, your body will rot from the outside in, and finally, you will turn to ashes in agony, understand? The whole process won't take long, just about 10 minutes, but believe me, it will be the longest 10 minutes of your life. Enjoy it, Qin Mingzi. Understood. Fu Qian exhaled. Can you tell me roughly when Gengyu will be back now? The black patterns had already covered nearly half of Fu Qian's body, yet he seemed oblivious, and instead asked in a slightly slurred voice. Ha ha ha. Fu Qian's question left Ryushing stunned for a few seconds, then he burst out laughing. You definitely won't make it, but don't worry, in half an hour, you will see that woman. If you're lucky. You might see someone else too. In half an hour. Fu Qian's brow furrowed. Undoubtedly, what Ryushing mentioned was the timing for the talisman around Gengyu's neck to activate. Didn't this mean that Gengyu wasn't supposed to be dead when he entered? It wasn't that the talisman failed to activate on time, but rather it had activated prematurely last time. Fu Qian glanced at the clock on the wall. It had been only about 20 minutes since he had left the dining room. Ryushing's original setting must have been for about an hour after his entrance into the dining room. This explained why Ryushing wasn't particularly panicked upon seeing him, a stranger. In Ryushing's mind, Gengyu definitely wouldn't be dead yet, so the thought of the night watchman coming to his door never crossed his mind. So, in the end, it was his previous entry into the containment scene that caused the talisman around Gengyu's neck to activate prematurely. Why did that change happen? To confuse him. An answer flashed through Fu Qian's mind. He had come in to kill the evil omen. The talisman, for some reason, had activated early, leading to a horrific bloodbath before him, which was certain to capture his attention. The crucial part was that the bloodbath pointed towards a person who, both in whereabouts and behavior, was extremely suspicious. This was the reaction of the evil omen to him. Chapter 68, Chapter 68, Chapter 67, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 13_1. Chapter 68, Chapter 67, The Evil Omen Must Die, Part 13_1. This survival talent is a bit too much. Fu Qian looked at his lifeless arm, quickly analyzing the information he had just received. If the speculation was true, it could be said that the evil omen had reacted the moment he entered, causing a slight malfunction in Ryushing's arrangement to attract his attention. It could be called a full automatic, three-dimensional survival system. As for how it was achieved, it might be related to the tree he had seen. That thing was clearly of a high phase, and as its worshipper, it had provided him with a kind of special protection. Thus, the logic behind why the evil omen was hard to kill made sense. But if that was the case, he would need to adjust his action strategy. This was a kind of protection that could even sense the intent of danger and quickly respond with misleading actions. This would make any scheme difficult to execute. Any action would be met with a tailored response, which was quite troublesome. While Fu Qian was lost in thought, Ryushing made a new move. He rubbed his fingers on his neck, finally finding something, pinching it with his fingertips, and with painful groans, pulled it out piece by piece. Blood slowly dripped down from the wound, but Ryushing seemed to feel nothing. Fu Qian looked at what was in his hand, a transparent strip about 20 centimeters long with faintly discernible, distinctly shaped patterns. And as the strip was pulled out, the aura emanating from Ryu Xing's body quickly turned eerie, no longer maintaining his previous human-like form. That must have been what he was using to conceal his aura, and it seemed to work quite well, having successfully deceived Lu Jun and another person. Oh! And his wife. I suddenly realize, killing really does bring pleasure. My previous thoughts might have been wrong. Ryu Xing laughed wildly, looking like a maniac. I have to thank you, and that bitch Gung Yu, for helping me realize this. The curse I bear does have its meaning, at least it allows me to freely kill the trash I dislike. At this moment, his skin surface actually began to secrete patterns, adding a touch of malevolence to his appearance. Such a great villain transformation. But at most, you're only a 7th phase, so what kind of airs are you putting on here? Fu Qian shook his head and stood up, despite the horrified gaze of Ryu Xing. The next moment he shook his body, flakes of skin with black patterns fell from his body, turning to ash the instant they separated. I was just going along with you, and you got all serious. In the instant I was struck, that outer layer of skin had already detached from my body. Thanks for the hospitality, I'm a bit busy so I won't disturb you further. If you're thinking of revenge, I, Qin Mingzi from Linkheng, am always ready, he said. How could this be? Ryu Xing uttered a standard disposable characters line. You clearly, why? That, I find it difficult to explain clearly to you, as there is quite a bit of difference in our levels. Fu Qian glanced at him, turning around and heading outside. You didn't come for Gung Yu. Ryu Xing seemed to suddenly understand something. Have you been toying with me all along? Ryu Xing said through clenched teeth, his eyes growing more ferocious as he grabbed the crossbow that was lying aside. The next moment, another flash of cold light shot out. Fu Qian's back seemed to have eyes of its own, easily dodging the sneak attack. However, after releasing the arrow, Ryu Xing moved forward silently, donning a bizarrely shaped glove on his hand, reaching for Fu Qian's back. Since you're so insistent. In Ryu Xing's horrified gaze, Fu Qian turned into a blurry phantom. The next moment, his body was as if struck by an invisible cannonball, and he was sent flying backward. Before his body even hit the ground, Fu Qian was already there, stomping down with his left foot. Boom. The gusting wind howled, and shock waves surged. Ryu Xing's body shook tremendously, quivering like a torn piece of cloth. After a series of cracking sounds, he slammed heavily onto the ground. If this weakling is an evil omen, I'll eat my keyboard. Without so much as a glance at Ryu Xing, who lay on the ground gasping for breath, Fu Qian left through the door. Everyone has their beliefs. Aspiring to be a normal person, willing to live an ordinary life for the love in one's heart, it might be difficult to judge right from wrong. But to immediately turn dark and deny one's past self after being betrayed by a loved one is definitely foolish. Last time, just the sacrifice of a newly 6th phase retired transcendent and a party including Huang Jianyuan had brought about a calamity. This meant that his current accumulation was quite sufficient, and he was very close to success. There wasn't much time left, I needed to act quickly, with no time to entangle with this guy. Facing the Huang family estate, Fu Qian rapidly sketched a map in his mind, recalling the route he took last time. Fu Qian had an excellent memory, and it wasn't difficult for him to remember these things. If Huang Yuanchang was an evil omen, then that retired transcendent who had died was still an excellent target. An independent living environment, with readily available opportunities for stealth attacks. There was no reason not to take advantage of it. The grand entrance and square were strikingly visible, the Huang family estate still presented a scene of peace and comfort. Without any hesitation, Fu Qian headed straight forward. With each step he took, the muscles and bones of his face adjusted slightly, swiftly transforming into another visage. By the time he reached the entrance, Fu Qian had already taken on the appearance of Huang Jianyuan. Open the gate. Fu Qian grunted, frowning, without sparing a glance at the guards. The two guards looked at each other in bewilderment, under unbearable pressure due to Fu Qian's obviously foul mood. You're returning so early today. Finally, one of them managed a smile and mustered the courage to speak. Fu Qian lifted his head, giving him a cold glance. The latter silenced instantly, and the guards hurriedly opened the gates. Indeed, choosing to take on the form of Huang Jianyuan was the right move. From our brief encounter, this man was clearly quick-tempered and probably not someone who greeted people with a smile. Simply keeping a stern face was enough, Even if there were anomalies, no one would dare to question, and there was no need to explain anything. I easily entered the gate, and following the route etched in my mind, I moved swiftly forward without any obstructions, ignoring all greetings. The familiar courtyard soon came into view. As I took a step forward, I caught a whiff of blood in the air. Without a word, I stepped heavily on the ground, my body leaping high into the air, jumping straight into the courtyard. Inside the wide-open door, two blurry, bloody bodies were still writhing, with dark flesh tendrils snaking between them and extending in every direction. So fast. Last time, it wasn't until the next day when Huang Leiji and his group went out that they made their move, but now they've started killing right away. Is it because they knew I would come looking for him? However, this situation was sure to be discovered quickly, also meaning it would be difficult for him to continue lurking within the Huang family estate. Huang Yuanchang must have already left. Fu Qian thought silently, and the next moment, a piercing alarm sounded through the sky. It seemed someone had discovered the anomaly here, and a large number of people were rushing towards this location. Part 4 of the series ends here. Thank you for watching and listening. If you find it interesting, please give us a like, a comment and a subscription so that we have the motivation to make the next videos.